Hey guys, how are you all? Welcome back to my channel. Today we will see what if Naruto has death powers. If you enjoy then please like, share and do comments. No. Naruto screamed in his mind. He dodged another sword swipe that came at him from the side. It was a trap, Naruto realized, too late. A hand went through his chest. Naruto stared into the eyes of Sasuke Uchiha. Both their faces held no emotion. It was inevitable, they both thought. When Sasuke made that choice all those years ago to abandon Konoha, it was the signing of an unwritten agreement. Either Naruto would die Sasuke's hand or vice versa. Naruto learned the cold hard truth of life those 2 years away. Blood came out of Naruto's mouth. He chuckled a little. It was only supposed to be an escort mission. Naruto thought back. Then again, I was supposed to be a better ninja by this time. Naruto chastised himself for his carelessness. He spent 2 years training with that pervert Jiraiya, 2 years to defend himself from Akatsuki, 2 years to surpass Sasuke, all wasted. He heard a scream. Who was it? It sounded feminine. Naruto thought for a moment. Sakura. That's right, Sakura and Kakashi were on this mission too. Tsunade had assigned Team 7 to escort a young noblewoman back to Grass Country. After meeting, she had a meeting with the Hokage. Tsunade had said some nonsense about refreshing their stale teamwork. As if those two ever wanted to be on a team with me. Sakura had always rejected Naruto in favor of Sasuke, same as Kakashi. The only reason they ever helped me was because the Uchiha left. He hated the name, he hated the person the name belonged to, and he hated everything about his existence. Sasuke was just like Naruto in a sense. He wanted power and would do almost anything to get it, and yet Sasuke was the closest thing to a brother Naruto ever had. The difference was Konoha appeased Sasuke in every sense of the word. Sasuke was given everything he wanted, and yet he still ended up leaving. Naruto had to work for everything he had gained. Maybe that's why he respected Lee so much, and to a lesser extent Jiraiya. Naruto coughed up more blood. It was becoming harder for him to see. The only thing standing out were Sasuke's transformed eyes shining brightly with the cursed power of the Sharingan. The mission had gone south fast. Halfway to Grass Country, Team 7 was ambushed by Sasuke and Orochimaru. Their client was slain instantly as Sasuke took off her head. Kakashi and Sakura's eyes widened at the spectacle. Naruto scoffed at their reactions. Surely they realized that Sasuke wouldn't just offer his apologies and return to the village when they met again. Naruto rushed towards his brother and began battle with him. The other two were snapped out of their shock when Orochimaru almost decapitated Kakashi. Shortly into the battle, Naruto saw the difference in training immediately. He had a hard time keeping up with Sasuke's movements, and when he did go on the offensive, Sasuke wasted no energy dodging. Naruto had had enough. He didn't want to use his trump card now, but it seemed he had no choice. Red chakra engulfed Naruto, lighting him ablaze with power. Sasuke smirked. Naruto disregarded it. Last time he used her power against him, he was a novice. This time was different. He charged Sasuke in the blink of an eye, ready to tear his throat out. Before he could, however, he was pulled from the battlefield and placed into the damp darkness of his mind. He was in front of the cage of her chakra filling the entirety of the room. The one whose power was slowly becoming his. He was about to question the interruption when he felt another presence behind him. Turning quickly, he found Sasuke there, Sharingan activated. He quickly took a battle stance. I see one whose chakra is more vile than mine. Naruto turned around. There she stood in her glory. The fox bared its teeth into what could be called a threatening grin. Sasuke said nothing, but Naruto knew that something was wrong. The red that flooded the room reluctantly made its way back to her. Sensing something wrong, she immediately tried to manipulate the Uchiha. If you kill my vessel, you'll regret it. Sasuke said nothing and dissipated. Naruto turned back to her, intending to receive some guidance. Unfortunately, Naruto was pushed back to the battle to find a sword coming at him from the left. Naruto's eyes closed. He found it amusing what people think about before they die. He had heard that some people's life flashed before their eyes. He couldn't chuckle anymore. He could barely breathe as it was. His last thoughts went to Jiraiya. He didn't want to blame him for his predicament, but Naruto could only imagine the training Naruto got opposed to Sasuke's. He was sure that Orochimaru didn't abandon his student for the local brothels, leaving poorly written training manuals in place of an actual teacher. Those were Naruto Uzumaki's last thoughts before he died. Naruto's eyes opened to see Sasuke. His eyes widened and he immediately resumed his stance. Seeing no indication that Sasuke noticed him, Naruto looked down to see what was so important. His eyes widened. Naruto's body was there on the ground, a hole in his chest. Blood dripping from Sasuke's hand. He heard screams and shouts. He turned around to see Sakura yelling obscenities rushing towards Sasuke, leaving Kakashi to face Orochimaru alone. He looked back and forth, seeing no one noticing him. Wait. Naruto looked between the action and saw a man a bit taller than him staring straight at him with an eerie smile. Brown hair, glasses, brown eyes, dressed like a samurai. Naruto searched his memories trying to figure who this guy was and how come he didn't notice him before the fight. The man started walking towards him, that eerie smile never seeming to move. Naruto tensed, the battle forgotten. He would kill this man if he tried anything foolish. Relax, I do not wish to fight if that is what you're thinking. Naruto stood tall. Who are you? Why didn't I notice you when the battle started? Why is it my body is there visible in front of me? The man chuckled. Relax, I am Sosuke Aizen. You didn't notice me because you cannot see while alive, and to answer your last question, you're dead. Naruto scowled. I see, and why is it I'm not in the afterlife? Aizen's eerie smile became even more bizarre. That's because you need a death god to send you there. I happen to be a death god. Naruto frowned. Alright, then send me. Aizen laughed. I'm sorry, I can't. Luckily or unluckily, I'm the first one to find you, and I can't let such an interesting spirit go to waste. Naruto readied himself for a fight. What's that supposed to mean? Aizen waved him off. Something's different about you. I can sense the spiritual pressure you have is the most impressive I've ever felt for a recently deceased. If I sent you to the Soul Society, no doubt you would be made into a Shinigami. You would become great, maybe even make captain, but then your potential stops there. Naruto scrunched his face in confusion. Aizen chuckled at the boy. The energy I sense coming from you is different from anything else I've ever felt. Because of this, I've decided to help you. Deciding enough was enough. Naruto lunged at the so-called Shinigami. As he was about to connect with the grinning man's face, a roar, unlike anything Naruto ever heard before, came from the woods. He looked toward the woods. Trees were groaning as they were ripped from the earth, giving way to a monstrous humanoid. It was easily over 3 times Naruto's size, a creature whose skin was as black as the darkest night. Veins threatened to burst on his massive arms. The trait that stood out the most, in Naruto's opinion, was its head. It appeared to be a skull. Naruto couldn't tell if that was his actual or not, though, noticing a second set of teeth inside of it. A split second later, the beast was charging Naruto, letting out an inhuman roar as its footprints ripped into the earth with each step. Even those amongst the living took a brief pause from their battle to gaze curiously at the phenomenon. Naruto jumped back as the creature smashed one of its hands into the ground. Naruto quickly formed hand seals, Kage Bunshin no Jutsu. Nothing happened. Naruto didn't feel the familiar rush of chakra build up and exit his body. He tried it again, same thing. He looked over to Aizen expecting an answer. The man merely smiled at him. You're dead. The abilities you had in life won't work the same now. Naruto cursed and looked back at his attacker. It made another swipe at him. He ducked under it and jumped back again. He cursed. Without his jutsu, he was practically defenseless. Going hand to hand against this beast would be suicide. He resorted to the only thing he could do, run away. He almost made it into the woods when something ensnared Naruto. He turned his head around to find the monster's arm had become a tentacle. The monster made a squelching noise, signaling its joy in capturing its intended prey. Food, 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 the most delectable of delicacies, all mine, the beast shrieked. Naruto became determined and started struggling against the beast's vice grip on him for all he was worth. Dead just a few minutes and already Naruto was going to be devoured by a monster because some stupid Shinigami wouldn't do his job right. Well, he wouldn't give up. He was Naruto Uzumaki, damn it, and when things looked their bleakest, Naruto would come out on top no matter what. The beast's arm was cutting in deeply to Naruto. He growled in pain. It felt as if his energy was being drained from him. It felt as if barbs had sprouted and started digging deeper into his skin. The fire in his eyes quickly diminished, replaced with fear and panic. He started struggling even harder, damaging himself in the process. Kyuubi, Kyuubi. Damn it, Fox, if you're there, you need to help me if you don't want to become this thing's next meal. Then he felt it. The power he learned how to use course through his body. It was different, more vicious than the last time he had used it. It began to burn, to scorch his entire being as if he had been set on fire. Naruto started screaming, the pain unbearable. The power burst forth from Naruto's body, ripping his skin to free itself from its prison. The creature started howling in pain as the blood-red energy started to disintegrate the creature's arm. The beast pulled what was left of the destroyed appendage away in hopes of alleviating the tortuous pain. Aizen stood there, a manic grin graced his face. He knew this boy was special, but even he didn't expect this. The amount of energy the boy was releasing was enormous. It wasn't only that. This energy was dark, malicious, and evil. His chain of destiny practically disappeared when that energy started enveloping him. He marveled at this young boy's transformation into a hollow. Aizen pondered which type the boy would become. He could become useful later. Aizen looked around. There it was, the hollow that attacked the child. It began to back away, the beast shaking from fright at the new energy. It was then that Aizen noticed something most interesting about young Uzumaki's strange energy. The hollow's wound from contact with the energy didn't seem to stop the damage. The beast's arm continuously dripped more and more of its essence. Aizen chuckled. Yes, this Naruto Uzumaki is most interesting. The fox's power was starting to overwhelm Naruto's senses. He could feel everything, see everything, hear everything. He had awareness unlike anything he had ever had before. Euphoria ran parallel with pain. He could feel his body change, tear and rearrange itself. He was beginning to see new growth sprout from his body, bone-white substance that tried to wrap itself around Naruto. If he didn't do something, Naruto would lose himself within the bittersweet taste of this power. He fought against it, tried to force it back within his body. He hammered his head into the ground, desperately trying to focus on a pain less severe than the one that ravaged his body at the moment. Slowly Naruto forced the demon's power back down into its dormant state. The bone-like appendages started to recede slowly back into his body. Naruto was succeeding. The pain began to lessen, his senses returning to normal. He smiled a little to himself at his accomplishment. He was about to stand and beat the Shinigami so bad he would wish he was alive, when he felt the familiar burning sensation. Naruto's body exploded into red energy once. The amount coming out seemed to be double the last. Aizen's eyes widened slightly. This boy had surpassed his expectations tenfold. His spiritual pressure at the moment was greater than some of the captains back in Soul Society, and it seemed to be continuing. The area around them seemed to become distorted. It came to the point where even the humans began to take notice. Orochimaru was standing over Kakashi when he felt it. Killing intent of such magnitude that even he had trouble breathing. Kakashi would have pressed the advantage if he wasn't in a similar state. Sasuke and Sakura weren't doing much better. The feeling in the air that you absolutely wanted to die just for remaining in the area too long brought them to their knees. Each of the individuals turned toward the source. They couldn't see anything, yet the killing intent remained. The air around the area began to distort slightly. It seemed like a person was coming into view. The image was blurry and the red that surrounded the individual made it harder to see. Suddenly something burst forth from the person's body and began to wrap around him. Sakura started to tremble with fear. She had never felt anything like this before. She stared at the person that seemed to be engulfed in flames as his body transformed. He began to thrash and screamed an inhuman scream. She wanted to turn away. She tried with all her might, but she couldn't pull away from the disgustingly enticing sight. Kakashi had to get out of there fast. The massive amount of killing intent seemed to have distracted Orochimaru. Now all he had to do was pull himself together, grab Sakura and get out of there. He would grab Naruto's body later and hoped an opposing village wouldn't stumble onto it beforehand. He took several deep breaths and steadied his heartbeat. He would only get one shot at this. He got to his feet and dashed to Sakura's position. The closer he came to the source, he realized, the worse it became. Pushing through with his willpower, he managed to throw Sakura over his shoulder and head off into the woods. Orochimaru realized his opponents were gone and cursed slightly. He wanted all three of them disposed off. No matter, as long as the blonde died, that's all that mattered. He turned to Sasuke to find that he was trembling on his knees. He appeared in front of Sasuke, grabbed him and headed off in the opposite direction. This time it was much worse, Naruto thought. His mind screamed for it to stop, to do something, anything that would relieve him of the pain. Naruto's memories slowly began to leave him, everything that happened in his life forgotten. He could feel his body bend, rip, and crack as it reshaped itself. He fell on all fours, the hollow mask forming on his head in the shape of a fox. His skin seemed to melt off, reform, and became covered in black fur. Armor covered his body over the fur on his back, sides, and legs. Naruto's hands and legs became paws. Jagged spines started growing from his neck and proceeded down his body until 9 tails sprouted, with each tail colored black with a white tip. A hole formed in his back. Creeping up from the hole were seals that set themselves in place on Naruto's back. When finished, the seal cracked. The transformation complete, Naruto let loose a roar that shook the trees. Smelling something that was most appetizing, Naruto turned to see his fellow hollow on its knees. Before it could react, Naruto ripped off its arm. It screamed in pain as blood flowed freely down the wound. It fell on its back, trying to move away from the fox. Naruto dropped the arm and bit into the hollow's neck, thrashing, ripping, anything to shut it up for good. Naruto started devouring it in a grotesque display of an animal that hasn't eaten for some time. Aizen looked on in interest. A hollow who eats other hollows. He had indeed heard of such a thing, but a deceased who became one during his transformation. Aizen would chalk it up to the strange energy put out by the boy. The weird seal-like markings on the hollow's back also brought up many questions. After they appeared, the flow of Ryotsu from the boy stopped when it was clear that he had much more. The hollow Naruto had finished his meal and turned towards Aizen. He didn't know why, but the sight of that man's face enraged him to no end. He wanted to rip off in a most painful manner. He growled at the Shinigami. Aizen smirked. Naruto charged at Aizen at an incredible speed. As he was about to rip the Shinigami's throat out, he was kicked in his side. Naruto backed several feet and righted himself in the air to make a decent landing. The man was dressed in a similar state to Aizen, save for the white haori he had on. Aizen, what's going on? What happened to the hollow we were supposed to be chasing? What in the world was that energy I felt? Aizen regarded his captain for a moment. Most incompetent he was. He only had his position because he was from a noble family, and some asinine sense of justice. Taicho, I had tracked down the hollow to this location. He was drawn here due to the high spiritual energy of one of the recently deceased. I arrived too late as the boy had started transforming. When I arrived, I would have intervened if not for the strange energy the boy seemed to have. The captain regarded his vice-captain for a moment. He sighed in frustration. They needed to take care of this new hollow now, then continue on with their original mission. Aizen, after this battle is over, you're going to tell exactly what happened here. Yes, Taicho. The two Shinigami drew their swords and got into battle stances. Naruto readied to charge the men. 2 Shinigami against 1 Ejuka's class hollow. Naruto circled around the 2 Shinigami. His mind was conflicted on which course of action to take. Voices argued within the hollow's mind, causing Naruto to stop and stare at the 2 before him. The captain quickly tried to analyze the situation. He had seen some major combat in his time back in the old days when unsealing your full power in the real world was a simple task. Now it was a hassle to get a message to the right people. On top of it all, this hollow was obscenely strong if the excess Ryotsu that was leaving the beast's body was any indication. He turned back to the hollow before him. It seemed the monster was distracted by something. Perfect. Destructive Art 63. Twin Lotus Blue Fire, crash down. The Shinigami roared. 2 streams of blue fire screamed towards Naruto. The voices arguing in Naruto's head stopped. His eyes regained focus in time to see 2 streams of blue flame head towards his direction. Naruto jumped to the side as the fire crashed into the earth beside him. Becoming engulfed in the resulting explosion, Naruto let out an inhuman scream. The captain breathed a sigh of relief. Aizen smirked at his captain's naivety while firmly gripped his Zanpakuto. He knew this fight was far from over. The dust cleared to reveal Naruto smoking slightly with several cracks on his body. He growled fiercely as red energy enveloped his body. The 2 Shinigami stared at the hollow in awe as the cracks reformed themselves. Naruto stared at the 2 Shinigami that attacked him, his anger flaring. The voices started bickering again about which course of action was best. Shut up, Naruto commanded. He had chosen his course of action. These 2 would die, and he would feast on them. The captain's eyes widened as Naruto blurred out of existence. Impossible, how can a hollow move that fast? He gripped his Zanpakuto and tried to regain his composure. He needed to remain calm if he wanted to defeat this hollow. The captain closed his eyes and allowed his senses to wander, searching for anything out of the ordinary. He felt it for just a split second, a powerful lingering of that strange ryotsu. His eyes snapped open to see a massive body about to crash down on him. The captain dove out of the way as the monstrous beast crashed into the earth he previously occupied. Decimating the ground beneath him, the hollow let out a shriek of irritation for missing his target. His eyes scanned around to see where the bastard hopped off to. Destructive Art 54. Abolishing Flames. Naruto snapped his head to the source of the noise only to see a stream of purple energy heading straight for him. The sound of the energy was deafening, yet Naruto was still able to catch a few other words being spoken. With light. Divide this into 6. Binding Art 61. 6 rods. Prison of light. Before Naruto had a chance to think, 6 beams of light impaled him in the back, preventing any kind of movement. Aizen smiled an eerie smile when he finished the binding spell. He had no doubts that Naruto could break out of the binding, but he was curious how the hollow would adapt to the new situation. Naruto thrashed around trying to move, the beams of light holding strong, when time seemed to slow down as the energy blast came closer and closer. Unconsciously, Naruto started to gather every ounce on energy he could in his mouth. The sight was spectacular as his body burst into pure red energy, a monstrous sphere of red and black that started to warp the space around it, forming in front of the hollow's face. Release the energy, show them power. The voices screamed into Naruto's mind in unison. The sphere shrunk out of existence briefly before Naruto opened his mouth, creating more cracks on the seal as he did so. The energy reformed and exploded from Naruto's mouth in such ferocity that the earth started to rip apart. The blast powered through the destruction spell like it wasn't even there. The captain's eyes widened at the power behind the attack. The amount of energy released was more than anything he had ever felt. Impossible, a Sero from a recently formed hollow. A blast of this magnitude should only be possible in Hueco Mundo. The captain pushed all of his strength into his legs as he jumped to the side. What the captain didn't count on was the hurricane of debris shooting out from everywhere outside of the blast area. Chunks of earth and tree ran wild in the air as the captain clumsily dodged and fiddled with something tangled in his clothing at the same time. Crying in triumph, the captain looked at the small phone he liberated from inside his clothing. Flipping it open, he frantically pounded the number to the department he was trying to reach. "We're sorry, all lines are busy, please try your call again later." The captain blinked once, then again he pulled the phone away from his ear and slammed it into a nearby tree. What the hell? In his fit of rage, the captain failed to notice the chunk of earth heading towards him. Aizen calmly watched as his captain was hit with the remains of the ground and the Sero attack finally dissipated. He whistled in approval, looking at the damage the hollow unleashed. It takes a lot of energy to affect the real world the way the hollow did. Calmly reaching into his robes, appreciated the texture of the fabric, Aizen pulled out the same type of phone his captain did. Flipping open the phone idly, he wondered how long it would take the hollow to recover from its attack. Normally Manos class hollow couldn't fire off a Sero that destructive unless it was in Hueco Mundo. Dialing his intended number, he brought the device up to his ear, waiting patiently as the ringing started. Aizen smirked when he heard the enraged roar of the hollow a few seconds later disappearing from the crater. It was intent on resuming its attack on the captain. "It's Aizen, I need you to lift the restrictions off my power." "My captain, I'm afraid he's fallen in the line of duty. I also need a Manos extermination team, the best available." Closing his phone, Aizen was pleasantly surprised to hear the Naruto roar out in pain as his captain shoved his sword through his mask. Naruto let out a howl of pain as the sword manifested a blue aura that tried to overtake him. Red and blue clashed over the hollow's body, creating cracks in its white plating. "Damn it, where's Aizen?" the captain thought, dodging a wildly thrashing Naruto. "I need to end the fight now." Jumping as far back as his legs allowed, the captain started chanting. Naruto's pawed at his forehead, damaging himself in the process, in an attempt to rip out the weapon. He started shaking violently. The pain had worsened and the strange blue aura gaining in strength. "Fool, don't be overpowered by this weakling. Show them who's superior." The voices again Naruto recognized. He nodded his head in agreement. He wouldn't be overpowered, no, these two would feel his wrath. Naruto's body suddenly became engulfed by his Ryotsu, the pressure from the power distorting the air around him. The Zanpakuto shattered into powder as its own aura was completely dissolved. As soon as it appeared, the Ryotsu receded back into Naruto's body, leaving no signs of injury whatsoever. Looking over the destroyed landscape, Naruto spotted the captain amidst the remains of several trees. Destructive Art 90, Black Coffin. The captain breathed a sigh of relief as the black cube formed around the hollow, enlarging in height as the familiar black tendrils shot out, solidifying before crashing back into the cube. The captain couldn't help but let out a sigh of relief. The energy dissipated, showing the results of what transpired within its void. Naruto's appearance went from pristine to absolutely abysmal. Puncture wounds littered his body, forming spider cracks, signifying how much of an impact was made. Blood seemed to flow like a small waterfall from each hole, forming a puddle on the earth. And his mask showcased many areas where you could gaze upon the hollow's natural face. The captain's relief was short-lived as the hollow started making its way towards him. What the hell is he? That Kido should have left him barely able to move, the captain thought. The captain was worn and tired. He had reached his limit, utilized every trick he could come up with, and it still wasn't enough. And what made it worse was the fact that he didn't have access to his full abilities. The hollow's footsteps were becoming more and more stable as red energy surrounded his body, healing his wounds. Puncture holes sealed up the mask, reforming. The captain smiled a small smile. Hey shrugged it off like it didn't even happen. You're Imenos, aren't you? It's unbelievable to think a recently deceased would be able to achieve that level of power. If you make it into Soul Society, no doubt you would be accepted into the academy. I'd even go on to say you would make captain eventually. Ryotsu swirled around his hand, taking the shape of a sphere, at first slowly expanding, taking the shape of a katana. But with the way things are going, however, it seems like you'll kill me and my worthless vice captain. He lifted up his completed blade and examined it as the Ryotsu pulled back into the captain's body. It seems you did quite the number on my Zanpakuto. I haven't heard this much complaining from him since I first used Bankai. He turned his attention back towards Naruto to see the hollow charging him. Need a plan, Naruto thought to himself. The voices had stopped trying to rip his head apart with noise, giving him a little bit of relief. Big blast blocks my field of vision too much, takes too long to finish, need to use something else. Wait, what if I release the energy I build up for the blast into smaller portions? Just needs to be a distraction. Naruto started to build up his Ryotsu again. It felt too bizarrely natural for Naruto's liking, like doing something for the first time in years. It was highly disturbing. He narrowed his eyes. He would have time to reflect on that later. Right now he had a battle to finish. Another seer. The captain never finished his thought as a small orb of concentrated spiritual energy exploded as it impacted his stomach. A bala. He fired a bala. The resulting impact flung him back. Dust kicked up as he dug his feet into the ground, attempting to slow his momentum. The captain's eyes widened as three more blasts screamed through the air towards him. He grit his teeth as he focused his Ryotsu into his Zanpakuto. It started glowing with a soft blue aura. It felt like his arms would break when he deflected the first shot. The second one missed him by several inches, but the third one was going to be a problem. TCH doesn't let up for a second, does he? The captain muttered to himself. The final bala was closing in as the captain was still trying to regain his balance from deflecting the first one. He tried to flash step out of the way. That's when he felt it. The pain flared from his stomach. He examined the wound. The gasp that escaped his lips. That's how long he was distracted. That's all the time that was needed for the bala to reach him. Regaining his composure at the last possible second, letting out a cry of pain, he managed to flash step out of the way before the ball of Ryotsu took his head off. Losing his footing on the uneven terrain, the captain tumbled. He tucked into a ball and rolled into the momentum, finally landing on one knee. Blood started to pour freely from his stomach. Now the captain silently berating himself for his carelessness in this fight. He placed a hand on his wound, weakly attempting to stem the flow of blood. He was breathing hard, borderline gasping. He looked around. Shit, where'd the hollow go? His mind quickly analyzed the situation. At this point all I have left is my Shikai. He grimaced in pain as he stood up. He held his sword out. A small sad smile was on the captain's face. He quickly went over what he never got to do and what he should have done differently, but the one thing he truly wished he could have done was get to know Retsu Hana better. Light up the world. His words died in his throat as his arm was ripped from its shoulder. It was weird. Instead of pain, the captain only felt surprise and awe at what this hollow just did. He turned towards the hollow to see what was left of his arm disappear into the beast's mouth, horrible crunching as it chewed on bone and metal. Wait, it ate my Zanpakuto? How? For the second time in his career, the captain was afraid. Everything this hollow displayed showed signs of being a prodigy in combat, figuring out how to fire a Sero blast, altering that technique and firing several Bala blasts, even figuring a way to do flash steps. All this, and he's only recently died. The hollow narrowed its eyes before one of its tails shot up like a spear and bent before shooting straight towards the captain. Feeling substantially weakened from blood loss, he pitifully dodged as the tail pierced the ground with ease. The pain came back full force as the captain was aggravating his wounds from the strenuous movements. So intense was the feeling that he almost didn't notice the second tail attempt to impale his other arm. He twisted his body as best he could as the tail left a gash in his arm. 3 more tails attacked him, faster than the previous attempts, bending at impossible angles as clumsily dodged. It was when all 9 tails started attacking him from all angles that the captain knew it was the end. Even as he dodged, the tails would bend at impossible angles and continue to extend, creating a cage that made it impossible to dodge efficiently. The sound of flesh being ripped echoed loudly through the forest as 2 of Naruto's tails pierced the captain's legs, then another went through his stomach, another through his shoulder, one through his neck, then through his head, one through his arm, with the final 2 piercing his neck. Barbs sprouted from the tails, ripping into the corpse as Naruto pulled his prize to him. He let out a roar of triumph as the captain's body made a sickening crunch sound as it impacted the earth. The other one? You forgot about the other one. Naruto's head snapped up. The voice was right there, that other one. His eyes scanned the surrounding. The only sight he could find was the destruction he created. I did this. My power did this. He didn't know why, but the thought of him having this much strength made him feel content. Naruto found no sign of the other Shinigami, which was fine with him. If the other one decided to flee, it only meant that he could eat in peace. Aizen replayed the entire fight in his mind. This boy surpassed every expectation 10 times over. He grinned. The adaptability and raw power the boy possessed, yes, he would suit his plans quite nicely. A frown made its way onto Aizen's face. There was that seal. He would need to figure out exactly what it was. And there was something else bothering him about the boy's appearance before his transformation. He felt as if he'd seen that face before, but where? He looked at the disgusting sight of the hollow devouring the remains of his captain as if to help him with his query. He felt the presence of 4 other Shinigami land beside him. Vice Captain Aizen, we are here as requested. Aizen turned to regard the Maino's extermination squad, highly trained in all aspects of Shinigami combat. They also studied, almost exclusively, the anatomy of Maino's class hollows. They were nobodies, just some people that showed potential but didn't have the ambition to reach it. Alright, the target you will be facing is a Juka's class hollow. It has already managed to kill my captain. The longer the fight went on, the stronger it became. Its Ryotsu is something I have never seen nor sensed before. It easily has the spiritual pressure of a captain. What's more is that it has a healing ability stronger than any other hollow I've encountered. Proceed with extreme caution. A resounding chorus of, yes sir, and simultaneous release of Zanpakutos was his reply. Naruto shivered in delight at the release of so much spiritual energy. The voices in his head picked up screaming about sustenance, another telling him to tread lightly, and a new one screaming about killing a man named Aizen. Blocking them out, he turned his attention to the source of the delectable feeling. There were 5 of them, each one putting out a little more energy than the one he just devoured. Need to be careful. If they hit as hard as the first guy, then I'll have to get the first move in. The familiar power coursed through his body as he readied a Sero blast. Aizen smirked as the 4 Shinigami trembled under the hollow's spiritual pressure. Looks like he noticed us. Aizen quickly moved to another location as another Sero blast decimated the area. The damage being more than double the first, the blast became stronger. Only 3 of the new arrivals were able to avoid obliteration. The unlucky one didn't even realize he was wiped from existence. The 3 other Shinigami regrouped around the vice captain, a little shaken up by the power behind the Sero. Impossible. The only way a hollow can create a Sero that powerful is if they're in Hueco Mundo. Aizen smiled. Quite true, but this one is unique. I believe the cause can be attributed to its Ryotsu. I'm sure you all felt it, right? The 3 Shinigami nodded in unison. You three perform the strongest binding Kido you know. Don't try to attack him, just keep him pinned while I engage him, understood? The three nodded once and started to chant. Aizen slowly drew his Zanpakuto as he started walking towards Naruto's location, Shatter Kyoka Suigetsu. Hearing the odd phrase, Naruto focused his attention on Aizen. Naruto blinked. He could have sworn that he just witnessed Aizen's sword shatter, doesn't matter. With that thought he exploded from his spot towards Aizen. Clearing the distance in an instant, Naruto snapped his jaws intent on ripping Aizen's arm off. A howl of pain was released as Naruto's hind leg flew off from his body. Aizen's body dissolved into nothing as Naruto passed through it. Naruto strained himself as he tried to stand upright, his body trembling from the pain of the wound, whimpering. Quite remarkable how fast that attack was. It only gave me enough time to sever one limb. Aizen flicked the blood off his sword. With your current power you have absolutely no chance of defeating me. In all honesty, I'd rather not purify you either, so I've decided I won't defend against your next attack. Red Ryotsu swirled around Naruto's wound, compressing into the shape of a leg before hardening. Naruto narrowed his eyes. The fool doubts our power. Show him, use your tails. Use their true power. The cracks in the seal grew as Ryotsu gathered around his tail. The air became heavy as Naruto's spiritual pressure grew. Aizen's smile faltered. Does he never grow tired? Is that seal responsible? Perhaps he even has the ability to become a Vasto Lord? Anyway, it doesn't matter, I've accomplished what I've set out to do. Aizen thought before flash stepping away. It was so exhilarating, the power coursing through Naruto. His senses allowing him to hear and feel everything. It even seemed like time was slowing down. He let out one final roar before he brought his tail down into a mighty swing, and then, there was nothing. Scorched earth everywhere and a tremendous lack of strength. That's all Naruto remembered after unleashing his attack. Naruto's body trembled as he struggled to stay standing. He needed a place to rest. He didn't care where as long as it wasn't here. The last thing he needed was another one of those samurai to fight, regardless of how tasty they were. Naruto closed his eyes as he tried to fight off another fit of trembling, this time worse than before. Forcing his body to calm down, he opened his eyes to see a portal in front of him. It was the feeling he got looking into its endless void, and it felt right. Somehow the dark depths called out to him. His mind, running on instinct, forced him to take steps one after the other until the gate sealed up behind him. The light of the full moon was reflected off the white sand of Hueco Mundo. The wind howled across the sand, creating the only discernible noise. The relative tranquility was broken as the winds picked up, creating a small tornado, and as quickly as it started it died down again to reveal a portal. An exhausted Naruto walked, the portal closing behind him, into the desert. He stopped a moment to feel the cool sand between his paws. He looked around the barren desert. This place felt right to him. He decided it was a good enough place to rest. With that, Naruto collapsed. Images flashed for brief seconds: beatings at the hands of strange people, swearing to become something called a Hokage, going to a school for trained killers, getting laughed at and picked on for answering questions wrong, eventually finishing the school by killing a man with silver hair. The Fox Hollow groaned, as memories of the day before and the odd dream flooded his mind, and opened his eyes. He slowly got up and began to shake the sand that had collected on his body off. Naruto growled as he thought about the strange dream he had. That boy was weak, only rising to the occasion when his precious person was in danger. Even then he cried about removing the fool that wanted to kill him. He didn't know why he had that particular dream, but one thing was for sure: Naruto was going to live for himself from now on. I'll do what I want, to who I want, when I want. That's a damn promise, Naruto thought. First, though, he needed to get his bearings. He looked around, seeing desert surrounding him on all sides. Looks like I'll need to find a place to rest. I'll be damned if I sleep in the open again. Besides, it's not like I'll get anything done standing around here, Naruto said to himself before walking into the horizon. Time seemed to be lost to Naruto as he traversed the deserts of Hueco Mundo. An itch found its way onto Naruto's back. He stopped and started to scratch with his hind leg. He growled in irritation. The itch spread to the entirety of his back. This ferocity increased. Chunks of gore came off his back as he dug into his flesh. This place is so damn boring. He stood back up, no trace of his self-inflicted wounds. Having felt the spiritual power of Hueco Mundo, Naruto expected some action. But no, the most he got was some jackass with size and no real power. Then again he was able to use the same, Sero, blast that Naruto could, even if only had a fraction of the destructive power Naruto's had. Naruto's mental drabble stopped when he felt a power presence heading towards his location at a high speed. I see, squeaky wheel gets the grease. He chuckled at his joke. Grimjow Jiggerjax grinned, as much as a hollow could grin, manically. He thought the day would go on as normal, hunt a Manos Grande, maybe go to the living world to see if he could come across a Shinigami, but instead he comes back to his territory to find some idiot waltzing through like he owned the damn place. The best part about it was the power radiating off whatever the damn idiot, it was almost as strong as him. Naruto turned his head away as an explosion of sand pelted his face. He turned back, gritting his teeth, and looked at the entity that was in the crater when the smoke cleared. Naruto looked at the jaguar-like cat in front of him with a sadistic grin. Grimjow was a little surprised at the Hollow's reaction. Normally they would have cowered in fear or attacked blindly. "Hey jackass, what are you doing in my territory?" Grimjow asked, a hint of his impatience leaking through his speech. "Your territory? I don't see your damn name on it." At this point Naruto didn't care how bad the retort was, he just wanted a fight. Grimjow let out a growl. "Tch, you trying to piss me off?" Naruto crouched low and concentrated on releasing his spiritual pressure. "Actually, I just want to kick your ass." Hawako Mundo trembled as two powerful entities clashed in the desert. Grimjow dodged as Naruto's jaw attempted to rip off his leg. Grimjow countered by firing off a bala. Dodging, Naruto struck out with his tails. Moving faster than Naruto could keep up with, Grimjow maneuvered his way behind the Fox Hollow and let loose a Sero blast. Naruto cursed as he jumped away, the explosion sending sand in every direction. It was a dance of white blurs and occasional roars as the two then engaged in a contest of high-speed combat. Blood rained from the sky as blow after blow impacted the two hollows, eventually forcing the battle to come to a momentary stop. The hollows skidded across the dirt trying to find their footing. Half of Naruto's mask had been ripped off, exposing his smirking face and blonde hair. "Hey, you're not half bad, cat." Grimjow's armored body had large chunks missing from it, blood spurted out from the open wounds. "Tch, you ain't bad either, damn fox." They circled each other, watching as each other's wounds healed, each not suspecting the battle to last as long as it has. Growls escaped both beasts' mouths, daring the other to make the first move. Grimjow let out a snarl, never being one for patience, and pounced at Naruto. "Cage him, cage the fool." As if possessing their own mind, Naruto's tails set about the task. They split into smaller pieces then before surrounding Grimjow, forcing the jaguar to dodge only for the tails to split again. They formed a cage, barely allowing any breathing for Grimjow, containing the panther before splitting off again, skewering him from all sides. Grimjow let out an inhuman howl of pain. "Bastard, what the hell? Let me out of here. Fight me like a man." Naruto scoffed at him before his tails grew barbs. "Shut up, the only reason you're alive is because of your impressive showing in that fight." Grimjow thrashed about, injuring himself further in the process. "What the hell do you want then? Either let me out and we'll finish this or kill me." Naruto shook his head. This idiot was hot-headed, maybe too much so, but he was strong, undeniably strong. "We're not going to continue this fight. At least not at the moment, because you're going to help figure out where everything is in this dump." Grimjow snarled. "Why the hell would I do that?" Naruto gave a grin. "Because I'm gonna turn this place upside down, that's why. Think of all the fighting and carnage that's gonna be caused. You can't tell me you don't want a piece of that." Grimjow stopped his struggling and regarded Naruto. "You fucking serious? You're gonna end pissing off the wrong hollow, and before you know it you'll be in his damn gut." Laughter echoed through the air. "I don't care. I'll kill 'em all." Naruto regained his composure. "So you in? Or do I have to rip you into itty-bitty little pieces?" For a little emphasis Naruto twisted his tails, and for what it was worth Grimjow didn't even flinch. He grinned an evil, malicious grin that promised death and destruction. "All right, Fox, you have a deal." The tails retracted from Grimjow's body, causing several more wounds in the process. "All right, since that's out of the way, I'm gonna need you to tell me what this dump's called and who the strongest guys here are." The wounds on Grimjow's body healed up before he started walking in one direction, soon followed by Naruto. "Alright punk, listen up. This place is called Hawako Mundo. All us badass hollows come here when the living world gets too damn boring. Problem is this place is just one big ass desert, that means you have a lot of pussies who live underground. It's not all bad, however, further you go in the more badass the hollows get. Then you have the deepest part of Hueco Mundo. Naruto was hanging on to every word he said. What's so bad about that? Grimmjow scoffed. That's where the Vasto Lords hang out. Vasto Lord? Yes, Vasto Lord. The most hardcore badass hollows Hueco Mundo has to offer. Vasto Lord? Naruto asked, even more intrigued. Yes, weren't you fucking listening? Vasto Lord, these guys are so tough that only another Vasto Lord has a chance of taking one down. Naruto snorted in amusement. So you ever met a Vasto Lord? Grimmjow stopped and looked back at Naruto. Just one. He let me go because he thought I was amusing, that bastard. Grimmjow growled as the words left his mouth. Yeah, and where's he set up? Grimmjow resumed his walking pace. He hangs out near Las Dunas Negras. It's called that because the sand there eats Ryotsu, which causes it to color black. Naruto smiled. Well, it looks like we just found our first stop. Grimmjow stopped again. The fuck you talkin' bout? This isn't some pussy we can go up and hassle, he'll mess us up. Naruto chuckled. Yes, from what I gather we can't really take a Vasto Lord even with the both of us, but what if we used that sand to our advantage? TCH, it'd take too long to get suck enough energy for us to be able to take him on straight up. Nine Tails swished in annoyance as Naruto pondered how to convince Grimmjow to fight. I didn't know you were a coward. Without warning, Grimmjow lashed out at Naruto. Who you calling a coward, punk? I'd bet you'd wet yourself if you met a Vasto Lord. Naruto cocked his head to the side. I wouldn't know, I'm not the coward who's afraid to fight one. Grimmjow crouched, letting out a threatening growl. Fine, you wanna die? I'll show you where Las Dunas Negras is, then you'll get your ass killed and I'll laugh at you damn carcass when he's done with you. It was a low whisper, easily mistakable for the wind. After that, Grimmjow didn't really say much except when a stray hollow had the bad luck to show his face to the two Ajukas. Of course this did nothing but irritate Naruto further, seeing as how everything was exactly the same except where rocks were. It led to him wondering exactly how Grimmjow knew where he was going. That all changed as they approached Las Dunas Negras. The air was permeated with energy, the sky was darker than where he was just a moment ago, and the sand started to darken in color. Alright, we're close now, you'll know we're there when the bastard decides to make his entrance. An absent nod of Naruto's head was the only indication that he heard. Naruto and Grimmjow both jumped opposite directions as a blast, black as a void, shot up from beneath them. Both bared their teeth as a lone figure rose up from the sand. Easily standing 7 feet tall, the figure landing gracefully, holding herself in a manner that dictated she held magnificent dexterity. Her mask was that of a feline decorated in a purple pattern. Her ears extended well above the top of her head while the face seemed to have an eerie Cheshire grin on it. Her hands were equipped with ferocious claws. Light purple fur covered her body while armor covered her upper chest and two tails swished behind her. She let out a small chuckle before releasing her spiritual pressure. Both hollows were sent to their knees, trying to fight the claustrophobic feeling before letting their own spiritual pressure run wild. The voices came back full force. Nibby, it's the Nibby. More power, you need to use more power. A Vasto Lord, run you fool, at least 3 captains are required to even make a dent in ONE. Nibby. Naruto eyes glazed over as more images flashed through his mind. Tailed demons, a man who had the resemblance of a shark, eyes the color of blood with 3 dots, and an organization named Akatsuki. Ah, cute little Grimmjow, you came back. Did you ponder the offer I gave you perhaps? And who is your cute little friend you brought along? The Vasto Lord's voice was soothing. Naruto shook his head, bringing himself out of his trance-like state upon hearing the Vasto Lord's voice. Naruto looked back and forth between Grimmjow and the female hollow. What the hell? Grimmjow, you moron, you told me this Vasto Lord was male. As if the spiritual pressure wasn't even there, Grimmjow pounced at Naruto. Idiot, what the hell are you talking about? Naruto dodged out of the way. TCH, what happened to? He hangs out in Las Dunas Negras and he let me go because he found me amusing. The Vasto Lord floated in mid, tilting on her side to give the impression of laying down, quite amused by the little spectacle. Grimmjow took another swipe at Naruto, finally noticing the glint in his eye. He nodded and continued his attack. The two focused their Ryotsu to such a high degree that it was able to push back the Vasto Lord's spiritual pressure, causing her interest to peak in the two. The two Ijuka's hollows prepared their Sero blasts intent on wiping themselves from existence. The red spheres materialized, warping the surrounding area, and before unleashing the devastating attacks turned and fired them at the Vasto Lord. She giggled at the amusing sight of the two cute little hollows attempting to harm her. She extended her hand out and snapped her fingers. The Sero blasts were torn apart as the black sand began to swirl around. She lowered herself onto the sand. "Ah, my cute little hollows tried to sneak attack me. I'm afraid you'll have to try harder. This is my territory, and because of it I've had enough time to learn how to manipulate this sand. Of course, now that you adorable little things went through so much trouble to attack me, I think I'll have to fight with my own power." She took a step forward and flared her Ryotsu, bringing every bit of her spirit energy to bear. Grimmjow and Naruto followed suit, trying to match their opponent's power but slowly failing. Naruto grit his teeth. There was no way he would lose. He couldn't. He had a goal now. He had a lackey, kind of, and he had power. He forced himself forward, slow steps at first, eventually turning into a run. The Vasto Lord's eyes widened. The two Ijukas should be on the ground writhing in pain with her spiritual pressure, but the fox was able to gather himself up enough to attempt another attack. Naruto leapt up and went for her mask, only to be backhanded by the Vasto Lord. Shaken up by the attack, Naruto bounced along the sand before smashing into a black rock. The Vasto Lord backflipped, avoiding Grimmjow's paw aimed right at her throat. "Cute little Grimmjow, seems your friend is only a lightweight EH?" The remark didn't faze Grimmjow in the slightest. He charged his opponent at a speed that even the Vasto Lord was impressed with. Naruto was in a state of semi-consciousness. Images flashed before him again, these ones different from the others. A monstrous fox faced off against an equally monstrous cat on a field decorated with the bodies and blood of ninja. The cat had the advantage early on, keeping the fox subdued through the use of fire manipulation. The fox grew frustrated and started to swing her tails, leveling the battlefield through the sheer destructive power. Naruto recognized that attack. He himself used it against those awkward samurai, but came to the realization that his paled in comparison to the female fox. He needed that power, he needed that strength to show the Vasto Lord and Grimmjow who was boss. He needed that power to show Hueco Mundo who they needed to respect and fear. He unconsciously reached out for it, never realizing in the confines of his mind he had his old body, trying to take it for himself. In Las Dunas Negras, both Grimmjow and the Vasto Lord stopped their one-sided fight as they both felt it. They both turned towards the Fox Hollow only to see his body disappear under a thick layer of red Ryotsu. Glowing eyes appeared through the veil of Ryotsu, the only indication that Naruto was in there, and started moving closer and closer. Grimmjow's instincts told him to bail out and leave his new acquaintance, but the curiosity of seeing where this whole situation would end up made him stay, though a little distance won't hurt anyone. The female Vasto Lord, meanwhile, trembled from recognition, rage, and fear as she sensed the familiar power. She was torn on what to do, her own voices waging a war over her mind to see who would handle the situation. It was a bizarre feeling. Naruto's body was moving like he told it to, but seemed like it was shifting, molding itself into something different on its own accord. It also became much harder to regulate his Ryotsu because of the simple fact that he had too much. Before, all he had to do was call it up and it would do what he wanted it to do. Now it poured out of every pore on his body. He was almost positive that even his blood was laced with it. Naruto never realized he was standing upright now while his white armor started breaking up, covering only his back, now outlining his spine. His fur had turned a dark crimson. 6 of his tails receded back into his body and the remaining 3 started to swirl with color as they changed color. His hollow hole had shifted from his back to above his right breast, the Shiki Fujin forming out of it and spreading up to his mask. The seal itself was cracked even more and appeared as some faded tattoo as opposed to its former glory. The voices came back, some more strained than others. "Now boys, show them the power of Kyuubi, calm and confident, a Vasto Lord soul. If only you were sent to Soul Society, disappointed and odd, impossible, I can't." The last voice faded until it couldn't be heard anymore. Naruto held up his hand and took aim at the distracted Nibi. Unlike the last times, this Sero felt completely different. The energy he called up threatened to rip his body apart. Unstable as it was, it took every ounce of willpower he had to keep it compressed. The sand warped and started to turn to glass from the intensity of the attack. His opponent stopped babbling incoherently just long enough to see his Ceroblast unleashed. Grimmjow looked on in awe, anger, and envy as his new ally had evolved to the next stage of power that every hollow longed for. Whatever plans he had to betray and devour disappeared as soon as he demonstrated his new power. His eyes were on fire by the sheer intensity of the attack. Resisting the urge to turn away, Grimmjow's jaw dropped as the sand directly beneath the blast was turned to black glass. He also noted the horrified look Nibby's face. What happened after that? Grimmjow couldn't be sure. The Cero impacted the spot where Nibby stood. He had to retreat for fear of getting caught up in the blast and pelted with chunks of sand and glass. When he finally did get his bearings, he was confronted with the visage of Naruto standing in a regal position surveying his handiwork. Naruto turned to look at Grimmjow, who flinched in response. Seeing his reaction, Naruto started chuckling, which led to full-blown laughter. "You lost to a girl." It was quite a statement that was meant to aggravate. Grimmjow, his recent confusion gone, ran up to Naruto. "What did you say, punk? You may be a Vasto Lord now, but I'll still kick your ass." Naruto chuckled again and pat Grimmjow's head. "Down, kitty, we still have work to do." The retort died on Grimmjow's tongue. "The fuck you talking about? Grimmjow, what the hell did I tell when I first told you to show me around?" Grimmjow shrugged. Slapping his hand against his mask, Naruto continued, "We came here for two things. First was to find a territory where we could establish a base of operations. Second was to oust a Vasto Lord to prove to Hueco Mundo that we aren't fucking around." Of course, Naruto never said that in those exact words when he first met Grimmjow, but he didn't need to know that. "Now, if you don't mind, I would like to find the edge of this blasted Ryotsu eating sand. It is rather bothersome." Grimmjow shook his head, caught up in Naruto's last words. The hell does he mean, Ryotsu eating sand? "I don't feel anything." That was when he noticed it. Even for someone as strong as a Vasto Lord, constantly flashing your Ryotsu was a sure way to tire yourself out. Though it was strange what was happening, it appeared that all the excess Ryotsu was being sucked into the sand, but that couldn't be right. If that was the case, then Grimmjow would have had the same thing happen to him. His eyes widen. Unless he has so much that he's actually sating the sand's hunger. Before he could ponder any longer, Naruto walked off. It had taken them far longer than the previous trip to reach the border, mostly because Naruto had to familiarize himself with his new form. It also didn't help that Grimmjow was asking idiotic questions. What the hell was up with that strange-ass Cero blast? This one actually caught his attention. Naruto had been wondering what the beam attacks were because personally the name, Super Death Happy Ray, was idiotic and stupid according to the loudest voice in his head. That was another thing bothering Naruto, the voices. First it had started off as one, then two, finally a third, and then went back to two. Not that Naruto cared as far as he was concerned. The only voice that actually mattered was the first, but he couldn't explain why. It was a bond, he figured. Maybe it was with him his entire existence. He didn't know and really didn't care. As Naruto was deep in thought, Grimmjow had been making some assessments of his own. He never expected this punk to end up like this. Truthfully, he just went thinking he would kick his ass and get a decent meal. Then he went and screwed any chance of that happening up. So he decides to take him to see Nibby, expecting her to kick his ass and eat him, then maybe he would join up with her. Instead, the bastard becomes a Vasto Lord himself and blasts her apart with one shot. Shit, might as well stick around for the long run. They both finally reached the edge of the black sand and stepped off. It still pulled at Naruto and Grimmjow, but it was considerably less. "Alright, cute little, Grimmjow, start digging." Grimmjow blew up. "What the hell? You gay or something?" Naruto sighed. "No, idiot. I'm just messing with you. Now start digging. And no damn back talk. This new body isn't exactly up to digging, and we only have to get to the underground tunnels that Nibby had." Grimmjow growled. "The fuck you talking about?" Naruto let out a frustrated sigh. Maybe he could still find another accomplice. Obviously, controlling the sand required some major Ryotsu control. There's no way that the sand can be kept under control passively, and if this was Nibby's territory, obviously she had to have stayed somewhere, and I'll venture to guess it was underground. Grimmjow nodded, bored, and started digging. Not that he wanted to, anyway, but anything to shut this bastard up. At first Grimmjow went about it physically swiping his paws at the sand for all he was worth. Soon growing bored with that, he started firing off Cero blasts, hopefully trying to stumble upon whatever he was looking for by luck. Getting frustrated with his partner's idiotic way of doing things, Naruto walked towards Grimmjow, quickly said move, and fire his newly patented, Cinco, blast, deciding to name it something unique just to have such a powerful attack associated with him. This time however he focused, it came easier than the last time, and more instinctual like when he discovered his spear-like tails. This time the blast was clean, no excess Ryotsu was wasted. Breaking apart from the main body, Hueco Mundo seemed to quake under its power as the dimension started to gain small tears, the longer the blast continued. Grimmjow watched in horrid fascination as the blast died down, revealing a glass pathway into Nibby's former lair. The two hollows descended into the depths cautiously, not knowing what they would face down there. The two stopped with Grimmjow was gaping like a fish while Naruto gave an appreciative nod. It was more like an entrance hall to a castle than the entrance to a cave. Large black stone pillars lined the walkway. The walls were carved, albeit badly, in a style that seemed familiar to Naruto. Looking up, Naruto discovered the ceiling to also be made of the black stone. Interesting. Grimmjow snorted at Naruto. What's so great about this place? Naruto merely shrugged at him. Go touch one of the pillars. Grimmjow walked past Naruto muttering curses under his breath and reached with his paw to one of the pillars. What the fuck? Mouths opened up on the pillar trying to grasp Grimmjow in their jaws. Hearing chuckling behind him, Grimmjow spun around to see Naruto holding his sides. What the fuck are you laughing at? I had a feeling something like that would happen, but for the actual stone to try and eat your Ryotsu, literally, it was too much. With a quick utterance of, fuck off, Grimmjow went off exploring, intent on figuring out what just happened. Naruto watched his cat companion go off before he started to inspect the pillar. Cautiously sticking out his hand, he was unsurprised when the jaws tried to ensnare him. Interesting. Is this stone natural or is it the sand having been refined? I'll have to ask Nibby the next time I see her. That was another loose he would have to clean up. Nibby had merely retreated instead of fighting Naruto head-on. It was a sound call and one that relieved Naruto. Even if he had more access to his power, the fact remained that that was all. It was raw power. Sure, he could just fire off Sero blasts at everything that moved, but it was taxing and it caused too much damage to the surrounding environment. He would need to refine what he had because without a doubt he would lose a fight to a seasoned opponent at his level. He wasn't even sure he could take Nibby. The problem was the time limit he had before Nibby came back to settle the fight. Letting out a tired sigh, Naruto decided to go find where Grimmjow was. No doubt his temper would lead him to destroying something eventually. At least he was entertaining, easy to rile up, and he had a lust for battle that would be easy to manipulate. It also helped that he was the first hollow he met that actually helped him. Granted, he had only met two others before him and he had to overpower the bastard to even get him to listen to Naruto's proposal. He still would need more allies, and judging by the way it worked here, it was a dog-eat-dog world, literally, and the odds of finding someone with Grimmjow's spiritual pressure willing to work with him were slim. That meant he would have to take in weaklings, hoping that they would find power under him, or he would need a way to forcefully give them power. He started walking with no actual destination in mind. He couldn't sense Grimmjow very well, and even if he did have a lock on him, he didn't is around. Naruto started musing about ways to adapt this place to suit his own needs. The black stone was good, it would keep him and his followers well hidden, but he would have to find a way to increase how Ryotsu can be absorbed, considering he could still sense Grimmjow. Maybe bust out a few walls, make some rooms bigger and personalize it. After all, the entire place was his now, and he wanted his enemies to know that when they tried to bust in here. The other parts of the cavern weren't much different from the entrance that they walked through, and Naruto was almost positive that that wasn't the only entrance to the place. He finally found Grimmjow looking around in one of the bigger areas of the place. As he was walking towards, Naruto did a quick scan of the room and let out an appreciative whistle. If anything, this room, at least, looked fit for a king. A throne-like chair was elevated on a high platform, both made out of white stone. Expansive archways framed all exits of this room. The walls had decently carved murals. Naruto guessed they were done out of sheer boredom, and on top was a transparent material looking out into the dark skies of Hueco Mundo. I call this room. With a startled yelp, Grimmjow bounced 15 feet in the air before glaring at Naruto. And who the fuck says you get this room? A smirk was his immediate response as Naruto thought out a witty comeback. I don't know, maybe because I can actually sit in the chair. The low growling of Grimjow was echoed throughout the room. You wanna start something? Not at the moment, we have a lot to do, and I need some questions answered. Before continuing, Naruto disappeared and reappeared in front of the throne. He gave a mock-like wave of his hand before sitting down. Alright cat, I need some more answers. First, how the hell do you become a Vasto Lord, and don't give me any bullshit like, you keep eating hollows and get lucky one day. I really need something serious to go on here. Next, I need to know if Nibby has any allies, anybody that she could go to if she needed some help. Yes, she's alive, keep your questions withheld until I finish. Another thing, who the hell is the top Vasto Lord in this place? Surely there's one bastard above the rest that can fuck up anyone here. And finally, we need a name for this place, any ideas? Grimjow wanted to yell at this son of a bitch and ditch him, he really did. The only thing stopping him was the fact that now he had a legitimate chance of being known as something other than the cat hollow. He figured that with Naruto he wasn't any worse off than he was before. The fact that he said that Nibby was still alive also helped him decide. Alright Fox, listen up. Nobody really knows how the fuck a hollow becomes a Vasto Lord. Each one does it a different way. You're the only bastard I know that had the raw power to become one straight up, considering you just died and all that. Nibby? I fucking doubt it. She's been here a little longer than you have, a couple years at most. Don't know how she became a Vasto Lord, just know she killed the other guy that used to hang here. And how the fuck did she survive that fucking attack anyway? Back to the point, most Vasto Lords are too strong to care about making alliances, and those who do make damn well sure that the guy they ally themselves with are worth the trouble. Top guy in this place, your fucking guess is as good as mine. If it's any consolation, Vasto Lords are rare to the point that you're lucky if you see one in your life as a hollow. Name for this place, how the fuck should I know? Call it whatever the fuck you want. Tapping his fingers gently on the armrest, Naruto considered his options. The first thought popping into his mind was kick ass first and ask questions later, but quickly dismissed it when the two voices in his head kept berating him for thinking something so stupid. He would need to find out who the top dog in Hueco Mundo was, but apparently the best place to ask would be another Vasto Lord. That brought him back to the fact that he quickly needed to solve his hollow ally issue. It seemed quite likely that alliances were quite rare among top dogs, and that meant that he would have to pick the best of the best. Finally, the name, since Grimjow didn't seem to care, he would pick something that fit him. Something simple so they know whose place this is, something like La Guarida de los Zorros. Yeah, that would do. Grimjow, listen up, the new name for this joint is La Guarida de los Zorros. Got it, good. Now I don't know when Nibby will be back, and she only dodged out of the way of the blast. Not really that hard, but until then we're redecorating. The term redecorating probably wasn't the best word to use for what the two were actually doing. All they did was walk in a room, use a few ceroblasts, and say they were done. The little issue of the loud creaking noises and unstable supports never crossed their minds. After an hour, Grimjow finally found a room that he claimed as his. It was smaller than Naruto's and was relatively plain compared to the others. Naruto figured he wanted it because it was on the other side of the caverns. After that, the job just got tedious and they just really didn't care anymore. After a few more rooms, Grimjow snorted. This is fucking boring. I quit. Naruto grabbed his tail before Grimjow could storm off. Wait. The cold fury in Grimjow's eyes almost made Naruto let go. Let go of my tail. It wasn't a scream but a statement spoken with a tone that demanded obedience. Rolling his eyes, Naruto complied. Yeah. Anyway, how do we get back to the human world? It was Grimjow's turn to roll his eyes. Damn it, don't you know anything? Shit. Alright, there's a couple ways to do it. Manos Grandes literally rip open the dimension. Before he could finish, Naruto gripped onto invisible edges in front of him, gave a monstrous yank and ripped a portal into existence. Gaping Grimjow never felt it when Naruto pushed him through the portal. The portal opened up in front of a vast field and the two hollows stepped out. Grimjow landed with a thump on his side while Naruto landed on his feet. Hopping up and taking a quick look around, making sure it was safe, Grimjow turned back to Naruto. What the fuck was that? You can't just go ripping dimensions apart like fucking paper. Quickly regaining his composure, Grimjow looked around again. Where the hell are we anyway? Shrugging, Naruto started walking. Hell if I know. I was hungry and son of a bitch, I was tired of those big ass hollows, all fat, no taste, damn it. So I figured there was bound to be something tastier out here. Hell, maybe we'll get lucky and find one of those samurai guys. Continuing on, Naruto could barely make out the muttering of samurai guys before they reached a dead body. TCH, no soul in sight. Samurai guys must have gotten here before us. He hears a snort of amusement behind him and turns to see Grimmjow sniffing the air. Idiot, try to sense the Ryotsu in the air. If you did, you'd realize there's a Shinigami not too far away from here. Shinigami? Grimmjow sighed at his partner's idiocy. The damn samurai guys. A quick oh and the two were off. Yoruichi Shihouen and Kazuki Urahara were playing hooky for a day. Not to say that they worked much to begin with, but nobody was brave enough to tell them that. The captains of the 12th and 2nd Divisions decided to take a small vacation into the new, hot topic, location. The 5 elemental nations became all the rage back in Soul Society once the newly promoted captain of the 5th Division, Sosuke Aizen, came back from a routine mission with disturbing news. Meeting a soul who became a Manos hollow through his own power. Never had there been anything like that recorded in the records of Soul Society. So being the curious little Shinigami they just had to check themselves. They had been there for several hours now, and aside from the most interesting fights they had ever seen amongst living people, they hadn't seen any hollows. At least until a figure came crashing down in front of them, creating a decent-sized crater. When the dust settled, they were pleasantly surprised to see the familiar white masks of hollows. Look, Yoruichi-chan, we have company. Grinning mischievously, Yoruichi nodded her head. Naruto looked at the two Shinigami and tried to sense their Ryotsu like Grimmjow had said. He was pleasantly surprised to find that the two were stronger than the first Shinigami he had devoured. Naruto blocked out the banter as one of the voices in his head started to protest his analyses, catching only the fleeting words of, "They didn't have more Ryotsu than me." Yoruichi caught Naruto's eyes in particular, not because she had a fair amount of Ryotsu, no, but because of another reason that he decided to voice out loud. Damn, you're hot. The two Shinigami chuckled at the odd hollow and started laughing when his partner berated him for being an idiot. Well, Yoruichi-chan, this is the first time a hollow's ever hit on you. First time for everything, I guess, but I'm afraid that it wouldn't work out seeing as you're a hollow and all, and it doesn't help that you're 11 feet tall. Urahara decided to take the initiative at that point. He really did want to ask his question before the inevitable fight broke out, and with Yoruichi here these shouldn't be much of a problem. Sorry Mr. Hollow, but before Yoruichi loses sight of why we came here in the first place, I wish to ask you a question. Seeing the Hollow nod his head, he continued, a couple days one of our acquaintances went missing. I doubt you would know his name, but he was dressed like we were and he was accompanied by a man in glasses. You wouldn't happen to know anything about that, would you? Naruto looked at Grimmjow, whose eye was twitching. Son of a bitch can't wait to fight, can he? Oh well, let's see, couple days ago glasses. Aizen, that bastard. I remember now. Yeah, I know who you're talking about. He was, after all, quite tasty. I'm afraid, now, that since you reminded me how good he was, I won't be able to let you go peacefully now. He felt Grimmjow's gaze on him and gave a nod, causing the Panther Hollow to attack. Barely dodging the paw swipe, Urahara let out a whistle showing he was impressed with the attack before drawing his Zanpakuto. You're quite the little speed demon, aren't you? He thrust at Grimmjow before the two disappeared off to another area to continue. Still smiling, Yoruichi winked at Naruto. Well, now that we're all alone, what do you want to do? Letting out a chuckle, Naruto replied, well, I was thinking of eating you, going back home and fucking up the Vasto Lord that no doubt wants her place back. That one phrase seemed to chill the air. Yoruichi's demeanor was no longer playful and relaxed. Are you telling you're a Vasto Lord? Naruto shrugged. That's what Grimmjow said. Faster than even Naruto could up with, Yoruichi appeared behind him with her Zanpakuto poised at his neck. Letting out a tired sigh, Naruto looked at the blade. Your blade spirit is screaming at you to run away, too late. With a speed that impressed Yoruichi, Naruto clamped onto the Zanpakuto with his jaw. She pulled with all her might, desperately hoping to get her sword back and take control of the situation. From what she had heard, this mystery hollow was only supposed to be at the Ajuka's level, and because of that Urahara and Yoruichi only cleared enough of their power to fight at that level. In all sense, it should have been impossible to gain the amount of power to evolve so fast, but if that was the case, then his Ryotsu should be massive. How was he hiding it so well? Clenching his teeth, Yoruichi's sword broke in half, allowing her to jump away. She looked aghast at the sight of her Zanpakuto disappear down the throat of the Vasto Lord. No doubt you're wondering how I'm hiding my Ryotsu, right? Yoruichi nodded her head. Ah well, I don't really know that myself. I figure that my seal helps me control it better than I should be able to. Here, let me show what I can really do. The air started to get heavy and wavy as Naruto started to glow red. Yoruichi fell to her knees as Naruto's Ryotsu formed a small vortex around him. Alright then, shall we begin? In an instant Naruto was in front of Yoruichi, who was still on her knees. The next she was sailing through the air as a vicious backhand connected with her face. Appearing under her, Naruto sent her upwards, connecting with an uppercut to her spine. A gasp for air was all Yoruichi could accomplish before Naruto appeared in front of her in mid-air and head-butted her with such force that the crater created from the impact looked like a small meteor hit. Landing in a feat of grace, Naruto made his way over to her. I really think you underestimated me. I mean, come on, I already killed one of your Shinigami captains. Isn't there one of you bastards that can give me a challenge? Well, I will admit the first two fucked me up something fierce, and I probably would have bit it big time if I didn't have a nice regeneration ability, but still. Yoruichi was vaguely aware of the hollow was saying she was losing consciousness and desperately trying to hit the red button on her phone. The red button, a function that was only recently added to all soul phones that Shinigami used. Once activated, it sends a distress signal directly to General Yamamoto. Its intent was to inform Seireiki of sightings of Vasto Lord-class hollows in the human world. So far it hasn't been used. The problem was Yoruichi wasn't sure how long it would be until General Yamamoto acted. Sensing something wrong, Naruto cut his rant short. Looking, he was amused to see Yoruichi grasping a small device. He bent and hefted her by her neck. And what exactly were you doing, cutie? He immediately regretted not killing her faster. The new spiritual pressure coming was bigger than Naruto's. The only consolation he could find was that it didn't belong to any one person but rather three. Grimmjow reappeared next to Naruto holding a very unconscious Kazuki Urahara by his neck. What the fuck is that? I don't know, but whatever it is, I think it would be best if we left Cat. Grimmjow looked hesitantly down at his prey and let out an annoyed sigh. Alright, open up a fucking door and let's go. Grabbing Grimmjow, he leapt aside as a bolt of lighting passed through the area that the two hollows occupied moments before. Naruto audibly gulped as he turned to look at the new arrivals. An old man with a cane that looked more like he should be dead stood at the forefront. An aristocratic woman that had a braided ponytail in front of her was on the left, and a sickly-looking man with white hair and two swords was on the right. Studying them, Naruto realized that the old man was the strongest among them, with the white-haired man second, and women a close third. Aw shit. Grimmjow, open up one of those portals, I'll stall them till then. Naruto said in a low voice. General Yamamoto evaluated the situation at hand. Two captains have been subdued and required immediate medical attention. There were two hollows, one Vasto Lord and one Ajukas. He hadn't anticipated this. With two of them here, they had a decent chance to escape now. Yamamoto had to treat this situation very carefully. Yoruichi and Urahara were still relatively close to the hollows, and any rash move to jeopardize their lives. I must admit, when I received the call from Yoruichi, I almost dismissed as one of her pranks. Talking maybe get him distracted enough to end the encounter quickly. Letting out the breath that he didn't know he was holding, Naruto inwardly thanked whatever power it was that got the three to talk. Oh, a call was it? That's what she was doing. I knew I should have killed her faster. Ignoring the three Shinigami narrowing their eyes, he continued. Anyway, I figure introductions are in order. Why don't you go first? Tell your likes, dislikes, and dreams for the future. Moving to Grimmjow's position, he caught the blade of the white-haired man who attempted to cleave the panther in half. Now you're just being rude. Planning to show the damn Shinigami some manners, Naruto was quite surprised to find that he broke his grip and moved back to his original position. As you can see, Hollow, we won't be quite as easy opponent for you. Yamamoto said he was quite impressed at this Vasto Lord's reflexes. Meanwhile, the voice in Naruto's head just wouldn't shut up about the female of the group. It's you, no Hana, don't hurt her, you bastard. If you do, I won't rest until I've killed you. I don't care if I'm only a voice in your head. Naruto groaned. He didn't really need this right now. On the other hand, he looked at the aristocratic woman. You know Hana Retsu, I presume? All three Shinigami's eyes widened at the Hollow's recognition of the 4th Squad's captain. Yes? She asked hesitantly. You're quite a bit more attractive than he made you out to be. Yunohana blinked in surprise. Who? Smirking in response, Naruto replied, "The 5th Squad's former captain, of course. He was quite attracted to you, you know." The Shinigami couldn't conceal their surprise at the new development. "And how would you know Saito?" Hana asked, afraid of hearing the answer. "Hey Fox, let's get the fuck out of here." Naruto backed up into the portal. Grimjow made he let out his answer before it closed. "Who do you think killed him?" The two hollows stepped back out into the throne room of La Guarida de los Zorros, each quite annoyed with the outcome of their hunt. Sighing, Naruto took a seat on his throne. "Fuck." Grimjow followed soon after with a similar curse. "Who the fuck were those bastards?" Naruto asked. "Don't really fucking know, but they were strong, a whole lot stronger than those others bastards." Naruto could only nod in agreement. "Though at least it wasn't a total loss. You see those two women? They were total foxes, no pun intended." Snorting in disgust, Grimjow started walking out of the room. "Whatever, if ya need me I'll be in my room." Naruto waved him off. Yeah, come back in a little bit, we'll need to discuss what we're going to do about Nibi." Time passed. Naruto wasn't exactly sure how long, days, months, or years. He didn't know. What he did know was that he was slowly losing his mind. Nibi still hadn't returned, and Naruto didn't dare risk venturing too far again. The only consolation he did have was that Grimjow was in the same situation. Looking towards the Panther Hollow, Naruto noticed the subtle changes taking place in his partner. The manic gleam in his eyes, no longer filled with lust for battle, held utter madness. Grimjow's once proud walk degenerated into nothing but a lazy shamble. Deciding to take a chance and talk to him, Naruto asked his question, "Grimjow, how much time has passed since we visited the living world?" Snorting in irritation, Grimjow started walking towards the exit. "It's only been 3 hours, idiot." With that, Grimjow left. Sighing, Naruto got up from his throne and proceeded to leave through a different exit. "I suppose I could finish exploring this place. Damn it, Nibi, where the hell are you?" It was a cry of desperation. If she didn't show up soon, Naruto had no doubt that he would do something stupid. It was getting harder and harder to be patient. The only thing stopping Naruto were the other voices yelling their opinions out every time he had stupid thoughts. So he explored. He ventured into the deeper parts of the caverns. Being in the bored state of mind that he was, Naruto didn't really pay attention to his surroundings or even the direction he was heading. Eventually, Naruto ended up in an area that was brimming with the black stone mineral. Finally realizing that he was lost within his own territory, Naruto voiced his concern the only way he knew how. "Aw shit." Looking behind him to discover that the path he had taken seemingly disappeared, Naruto had no choice but to continue forward. Of course, finding this little treasure trove seems like it was worth getting lost in the first place. If only I knew how I got here. Continuing on, Naruto started to notice something strange in this area of the caverns. The further he went into this soon-to-be mine, the heavier, thicker the Ryotsu in the air got. It was quite odd, considering the property of this stone should make it impossible for any Ryotsu to stagnate into the air. This could mean one of two things. It could mean that this stone didn't carry the same properties of the sand, or it could mean something particularly nasty was down here, something that possessed enough Ryotsu to put off enough energy to overflow the stone. Naruto grinned. The prospect of such a strong opponent, within his own home, would certainly be worth checking out. He continued on, completely unaware of the set of eyes that followed his movements. Sometime later, Naruto finally came upon a heavy stone door. Words in a language Naruto couldn't understand decorated the door. The voices came back full force, demanding Naruto leave at once. For the first time, Naruto ignored what both voices had to say in favor of his own curiosity. Slowly reaching out his hand to touch the door, Naruto was unsurprised when several mouths opened up, attempting to latch onto him. He quickly pulled his arm back. Naruto crossed his arms, thinking of a way he could open the door. Blasting it open could damage whatever's on the other side, and trying to open it like a normal door would only get my arm bitten off. I could use my tails to rip it open, that might work. Nodding at his ingenious plan, Naruto flared his tails to life. The 3 tails behind Naruto's back hardened and flew around his body at lightning-fast speeds, piercing the door. The mouths quickly sprung back to life, prompting Naruto to hurry with his task. Grunting, he ripped the door from its spot and flung it behind him as quickly as could. With that out of the way, Naruto waited as the dust cleared to find out what lay inside the room. What he saw was the last thing he expected to see. Inside the room lay innumerable eyes of all shapes and sizes looking at Naruto. Even the ground was overrun with the things. Naruto stuck his head in to find that the room was circular, quite big too, almost as big as the throne room. In the center of the room stood a figure wrapped in black chains, only enough to keep him from moving. The oddest part about the figure was the fact that he resembled a Shinigami with his eyes covered. This can't be right. He looks like a Shinigami, but he has a mask chunk on the side of his face, and he has a hole on his stomach. Just as Naruto was about to take a step inside the odd chamber, the Shinigami's head snapped up, revealing a grin that made Naruto want to flinch. "Greetings, young Vasto Lord." The Shinigami's voice echoed throughout the chamber. Naruto nearly tripped from being surprised like that. The figure continued, "And welcome to my domain. I have not had a visitor in over 2,000 years. If you prove to be entertaining, I may not kill you." Naruto regained his composure. "Yeah, what the hell do you mean, your domain? I beat Nibby fair and square, and the next time I see her I'll finish the job making this my domain." Naruto stared at the man intently, trying to gauge what his reaction would be. Laughter rang through the air. Naruto fumed as the Shinigami laughed at him. "The hell is so funny?" The Shinigami stopped laughing and looked at Naruto. "You are. Defeating that weakling means nothing. You didn't even kill her. As we speak, she hunts for an ally so she can plan a counterattack against you and that Grimmjow." Naruto's eyes widened at the Shinigami's statement. "How the hell do you know that?" The Fox Vasto Lord asked. "I am El Emperador de Ojos and I see everything." Naruto looked at the Emperor of Eyes, confused. Smirking, the Shinigami explained. "These eyes allow me to see what any hollow, human, or Shinigami is seeing. After 2,000 years of imprisonment, I had to find a way to see what was happening on the outside lest I go mad." Naruto just stared at him for a few moments before replying, "Okay, you can see everything. So you a Shinigami or something?" Ojos looked thoughtful for a moment. No one had ever asked that question before. After all, in Hueco Mundo it was about how strong you were, not what you were. He smirked a little considering his answer. "I guess you could say that. I was actually a Vasto Lord like you. Then one day, when I didn't think it was possible to become stronger, my mask crumbled under my spiritual pressure and reformed itself into a sword." Naruto nodded in understanding before asking his next question. "Okay, I understand that, but what the hell you doing chained up down here in my new mine?" Ojos tilted his head to the side, trying to come up with a response that didn't end up with him murdering the Vasto Lord in front of him, if only for the sake of manners. "Listen up, boy, the only reason you aren't dead yet is because I haven't talked to anyone in 2,000 years, so you better learn some damn manners. Anyway, the reason why I ended up here is a rather interesting story, so sit down, be quiet, and save your questions till after. It all started 2,000 years ago. I was very similar to you in all respects. I was new, I had raw power, and I wanted respect, and just like you, I even took on a lackey. Unlike you, however, my lackey had more ambitions than just kicking the shit out of everything that moved. He wanted to conquer the Seirei or destroy it trying." Ojos stopped and let out a chuckle. "And me being the oblivious hollow, I was never suspected Arturo would betray me until it was too late. I didn't go down without a fight, though. No, we waged a battle the likes of which Hueco Mundo hasn't seen for days on end. Then finally he cornered me in these dunes and his plan was put into effect. I was ambushed by my own men and chained and brought down here to this chamber made specifically for me." Naruto snorted. "What do you think, I'm lying? You felt the residual Ryotsu yourself. Anyway, after locking me in here, I asked why he didn't just kill me. You know what he had the audacity to tell me? He said that he wouldn't kill me because I wasn't worth the effort." Ojos let out a sigh. "I never understood why he said that. It seems more troublesome to set up something like this chamber." Naruto tilted his head to the side. "Who the hell is Arturo?" Ojos grinned a little. "Arturo Platido, he's another Vasto Lord whose mask crumbled under his own power. The fool attempted to take on Seirei and failed. Now he's sealed under the Sokyoku. Hey, now I have to decide what to do with you." Naruto tensed as he heard the last phrase. "So what? You wanna fight then?" Ojos threw his head back and laughed. "Come now, boy, you truly don't stand a chance now that you're so close to me. It's quite simple really. I don't have access to my own Ryotsu since I'm constantly being drained. However, that doesn't mean I can't focus all the Ryotsu in the air." That's when Naruto started noticing something strange about the eyes. They started to change color rapidly before a blood-red sphere started forming in front of all of them. Ah shit. It was the most intelligent thought that Naruto could get into words at the moment. Shit indeed, boy. Now here is what you're going to do. You're going to let me out of here, and in return I won't kill you or your partner. In fact, all I want to do is see how far you go before you stop. Naruto looked unsteadily, considering Oho's offer. And if I refuse? Naruto's response caused Ohos to grin. Then there won't be anything left of you. Naruto growled a little. Tch, fine, what the hell do y'all want me to do then? Ohos looked delighted at Naruto's response. Delightful, it's not that hard really, you just need to find a Vasto Lord to take my place here, since these chains are unbreakable. Oh, and don't even think about trying to backstab me because I have eyes everywhere. Cursing, Naruto turned around and proceeded to leave. Tch, fine then, bastard. Making his back to the cavern area was much easier. Getting back to the throne room, Naruto passed by Grimmjow, who was finishing off the remains of a hollow, and took a seat. Hey Grimmjow, hearing an HN, in response Naruto continued. Were you aware that there was an Arrancar imprisoned here? Hearing Grimmjow begin to choke on his meal gave Naruto the impression that he didn't. What the fuck, you serious? Naruto nodded his, yeah, the bastard called himself El Emperador de Ojos. Hearing the name, Grimmjow almost jumped up and got the hell out of there, only restraining himself because he didn't wish to appear weak. You fucking sure this guy said he was El Emperador de Ojos? You're not fucking around, right? Naruto nodded his head. Motherfucker, that guy is only supposed to be a legend. Shit, we need to get the fuck out of here. Naruto sighed at Grimmjow's reaction. Really Grimmjow, you need to calm the hell down. Let me explain the situation to you. Firstly, he's probably watching us right now. Secondly, I made a deal to let him out of his prison and I always keep my word. And thirdly, we couldn't leave and make it out of here alive anyway. Stopping his ranting, Grimmjow looked at Naruto like he was crazy and spoke in a voice so quiet you wouldn't hear it unless there was no other sound. Listen here. That Ojos guy was said to be the strongest hollow that ever existed. He was supposed to have been killed by Arturo Platido. What the fuck he's doing alive is beyond me, but if you think for a second that I'm gonna stay here now, you're fucking crazy. In a conundrum, Naruto tried finding the best way to explain things to Grimmjow without killing him. Listen up, Panther, the reason we can't leave is because I think that guy Ojos can control the sand somehow. With it he can actually channel the stagnate Ryotsu in the air where he's at and blast the hell out of us. Now you can try and make a break for it, but personally I'm gonna help him and maybe he'll be kind enough not to kill us anyway. Besides, he didn't seem like too bad a guy. Before Naruto could retort, a mass of black sand fell from above them, forming a pile. A familiar eye opened up and started forming a blood-red sphere. Grimmjow saw this and replied much the same way Naruto did, "Aw shit." Naruto chuckled a bit before responding, "That's what I said." The Panther Hollow focused back at the fox he agreed to join. "How is it that I get into all these weird, bizarre, and fucked up situations when I hang out with you?" Naruto shrugged at the statement. "Just lucky, I guess. Anyway, Panther, we need to find another Vasto Lord." Grimmjow scoffed at Naruto. "Oh yeah, and where the hell do we find that? They don't just grow on damn trees. I've been telling you we were lucky I even knew about the damn cat." It was a problem that Naruto hadn't solved yet. It appears that Ojos gave me quite the task. If that's the case, then that bastard has to pull his own weight. "We're going, Grimmjow." Naruto rose from his seat and started walking off. Grimmjow stopped his ranting and watched Naruto's retreating form. "And where the fuck are we going, Fox?" Naruto stopped and looked over his shoulder. The twinkle in his eyes told Grimmjow he wasn't going to like what he said. "Well, we're going to talk to Ojos, of course." Naruto couldn't help himself. The sight of Grimmjow with his face trying to look like a fish was priceless. "So you coming, or are ya just a big ol' scaredy cat?" Naruto chuckled as Grimmjow started cursing him before walking again, Grimmjow not far behind. As Naruto and Grimmjow made their way through Naruto's mind, several eyes would grow out of the stone to watch them as they passed. It was exceptionally hard not to flinch every time and would pop of a wall they walked too close to. Naruto stopped his companion as they neared the open chamber. "Alright Grimmjow, listen up, I don't know much about this guy except what he told me, but what I gathered, he's a stickler on manners. Don't ask why I don't know, so try not to offend him." Grimmjow grunted and nodded his head. The two hollows walked into the circular chamber and stared at Ojos chained in the middle. It appeared that Ojos wasn't paying attention, or if he was aware of their presence, didn't care. "Yo Ojos, if you want me and Grimmjow here to help ya out, you're going to have find us a Vasto Lord." Naruto waited for Ojos to reply. Finally showing signs of movement, Ojos cracked his neck. "Hey, I wondered when you'd come back and ask that." It doesn't look like I have a choice anyway. Alright then, listen up. There's 2 Vasto Lords on the way here now. Nibby found a friend, and all you have to do is go up there, weaken them and position one of them over my current location. I'll take care of the rest. And how are we supposed to know where that spot is? Naruto replied. A grin found its way onto Oho's face. Don't worry, you'll know. With a shrug of his shoulders, Naruto turned around and walked out with Grimmjow following behind. Alright Panther, you heard Ohos. There's 2 Vasto Lords on the way. One is already taken, but the second one, well damn, I wonder what it tastes like. Once we get back to the throne room, we each head up different ways. Yeah, we can get the jump on them and all that. With a quick, whatever, from Grimmjow, the 2 hollows were off. It was a short time later that Naruto found himself on the surface. TCH, you'd think those bastards would have been here by now. Naruto looked all around him. It doesn't help that this damn sand makes it a bitch to sense anything. Feeling something off, Naruto quickly jumped back, narrowly avoiding a small beam. Looking down, he found one of Ohos' eyes looking up at him. What the fuck, Ohos, you trying to kill me? The eye merely blinked before another opened up and another until a line of eyes led off into the distance. That where Nibby is? The eyes all blinked in unison, causing Naruto to shudder before heading off. Once the trail of eyes stopped, Naruto took a seat on the sand. Everything went dead after that. With the thrill of the chase gone, Naruto spent time looking around, hoping something would happen. It seemed like an eternity passed and Naruto let out another sigh. He hadn't been this bored since he first arrived in Hueco Mundo. What the fuck is taking so long? Squeaky wheel again, Naruto jumped back as a Sero blast decimated the spot he was occupying. Nibby, finally decide to come back, TCH, took you long enough. Naruto said as he stared across at Nibby and another hollow Naruto had never seen before. It wasn't as flashy as the first time she showed up, but it was effective nonetheless, at least in her opinion. Now Nibby had Naruto outnumbered and it didn't matter whether or not he was more powerful than her at this point. It had taken a silver tongue and many promises that she had no intention of fulfilling, but Nibby managed to convince another Vasto Lord to aid her in taking back her territory. Of course she didn't know his name at the moment. It was only technicality that could be overlooked as they dealt with Kyuubi. A chuckle escaped her lips as she thought of all the delicious ways she would make him hurt. Cute little fox, you've no chance against 2 Vasto Lords. Give up now and I promise we'll only eat you. Naruto shook his head in disappointment. Nibby, you poor deluded cat. Did you really think I would instigate a fight without any backup? The only reason we're still talking is because we're waiting for the damned idiot. You'd think, with his love of fighting, he'd find a way to get here fast. Never mind, there he is. Sand exploded as Grimmjow crashed into the ground. Coughing and sneezing, Grimmjow quickly shook the sand off his body. TCH, that's the last time I listened to one of your dumbass plans, stupid fox. Son of a bitch, there's sand everywhere. The slap against a hollow mask echoed louder than Naruto intended, but he didn't care and just let out a sigh. Idiot, we're in a damn desert, of course there's sand everywhere, Naruto's yell echoed. A growl of frustration left Grimmjow as his spiritual pressure was released. Shut the fuck up. I came here for a fight, so no more stalling. Moving so fast the sand kicked up, Grimmjow charged Nibby's companion. Nibby's companion was a new Vasto Lord. He didn't have the raw power others did. In fact, many who heard of him wondered how he even reached that level. The fact of the matter was, he didn't. The process he went through was ancient and forgotten, used only by hollows so desperate for power they didn't care of the consequences. It involved fusing an untold amount of spirit particles, from the essence of Hueco Mundo itself, to the hollow's body. The problem was most hollows' bodies couldn't adapt to the raw power infused to them. This left them in a state between a Jukas and Vasto Lord. Most who used it were the lowest of the low, and most high-powered hollows didn't bother with it, preferring to find their own claim to Vasto Lord status. It also didn't help that this was the Vasto Lord's first real battle against others who matched him in power, and it led to the critical mistake of him freezing when he saw true Jukas rushing him with the fury of the 4 horsemen. The resulting impact created a sound thunder would envy and launched the 2 hollows into the distance, leaving Naruto and Nibby to themselves. The look of surprise and lowering of guard was all the invitation Naruto needed to attack. As quick as lightning, Naruto appeared in front of Nibby, hands poised to deliver a hammer blow to the much smaller hollow head. Coming out of her stupor too late to dodge, she raised her arms up in an attempt to dodge. The sickening sound of bone crashing against bone sung through the desert as Nibby was being crushed into the ground. Silently overjoyed that the sand absorbed most of the blow, Nibby went on the counterattack. Like a light within darkness, Nibby's body started to glow. At first it was a tingly sensation for Naruto, but soon Nibby's body was fully engulfed in flames, causing the fox hollow to jump back in pain. She cackled madly before walking slowly towards her opponent. Do you remember our previous battle, Kyuubi? I've improved since then. My flames can now take on properties that you couldn't even dream of. Do you wish to see my new power? She raised her hand, causing the flames on her body to focus at her palm. Naruto could feel the heat from where he was. It was getting so intense that the sand around Nibby started turning to glass. The flame changed color to black before being released at high speeds toward Naruto. Dodging was the only option Naruto could think of at the moment. Without knowing what the fire did, he wouldn't risk trying to counter the attack. He jumped straight up. The chuckle that left Nibby's mouth was all Naruto needed to know that he made a mistake. Changing direction, the flames chased Naruto, intent on devouring him within their power. Her chuckling long since given way to mad laughter. Nibby watched as Naruto was engulfed within the black. The scream of absolute agony that was heard from the flames was a symphony of the highest class to Nibby. The manic grin that Nibby, miraculously, had threatened to break her mask in two as she watched the burned body of Naruto fall from the air. She giddily skipped her way towards the fox hollow, intent on taking her prize. Reaching the body, she knelt down, humming a tune while doing so, and pondered the best way to devour him. Closing her eyes to get a better mental picture was all the time Naruto needed. Snapping out his hand, Naruto was able to grab hold of Nibby's ankle in a vice-like grip. As Nibby struggled to free herself, Naruto chuckled. I'll admit the fire caught me off guard, but now that I know it can change direction, it won't work again. Before she had a chance to reply, Nibby felt her flesh pierced by Naruto's three tails. And one last thing, my name isn't Kyuubi. Releasing her ankle, Naruto dug his hands into the sand and tackled into Nibby, forcing her to the ground. Seizing the advantage, Naruto got on top of her in a straddling position and let his fists fly. The sound of thunder rang out every time one of Naruto's fists impacted Nibby's mask. The sand started to give way as Nibby's head was driven further and further into the ground. Bringing his fist back, Naruto put all the power he had behind his final blow. Nibby had to do something and had to do it now. All she needed was a moment to concentrate. It didn't help matters that every time she tried to form a thought, her head was smashed with a sledgehammer. Finally the barrage stopped and Nibby seized her chance. Her body lit up in brilliant black flames. The flames licked Naruto's body, causing a scream of agony to leave his mouth. He quickly jumped off of Nibby's body, rolling on the ground, desperately trying to put the flames out. The flames seared his flesh and started to spread. Desperate, Naruto flared his Ryotsu in hopes of extinguishing his agony. Nibby had been trying to regain her composure when she felt it. The last time Nibby had felt a power so great was when she battled Kyuubi last. Hastily she turned to her adversary, hoping beyond hope that he didn't access his full power yet. What she saw rattled her. Naruto's Ryotsu was literally pouring off him, bathing the sands in a red light. Slowly he could feel his skin reforming and healing itself. He raised his hand and immediately all of his Ryotsu slid back into him and concentrated into the palm of his hand. "Sero," he called out. A sphere of black and red enlarged from his hand before compressing and shooting off in a beam. It flew through the air, glassing the sand. Nibby moved off to the side as fast as she could move, missing the blast by mere inches but still being caught in the explosion. Launched in the air, Nibby gracefully flipped, regaining her balance before firing off a Sero blast of her own. She grinned madly when she saw that Naruto couldn't dodge, and let out a shriek of delight when her blast hit. Naruto cursed, seeing no way to dodge the attack, so he prepared himself by digging his feet into the sand. Closer and closer it came until it impacted Naruto's outstretched palms. Naruto clashed with Nibby's Sero blast, each trying to overpower the other. Nibby snarled at the scene and raised her arm, pointing her palm at Naruto. "Don't think it'll be that easy, Kyuubi." A familiar flame focused into Nibby's palm before it shot off towards Naruto. Distracted with the task of killing her nemesis, Nibby never noticed the eye that opened in the sand beneath her. His vision cut off due to the brightness of the Sero blast. Naruto was still able to hear what Nibi had said. Shit, Naruto had put all of his strength into one final push and was able to root the blast off to his left. Quickly, Naruto returned his attention to Nibi, only to have his breath hitch in his throat at what he saw. The black flames forming around Nibi's hands looked even more ferocious now, and it didn't help much that the ball of flame was bigger than Nibi's body. Need to make this. What the hell? Naruto's thought was cut short as a thin beam shot up from the sand, taking off Nibi's arm and disrupting the flames. He looked down, almost certain what happened, and spotted the remains of a glowing eye before it was swallowed up by sand. Fucking Ohos, this is my damn fight, stay out of it. Of course Naruto only said this to save face. It wouldn't do for him to admit he was relieved for the help. Blurring from sight, Naruto reappeared in front of Nibi in less than an instant. Not even registering the look in Nibi's eyes, Naruto delivered a monstrous kick into her side, sending her crashing towards the ground. Blurring again, Naruto appeared on the ground, brought his arm back and let loose a thunderous punch connecting with her abdomen. Naruto watched as Nibi was sent flying across the sand, every back up every time she hit the ground. Taking slow steps toward Nibi, Naruto's Ryotsu started to heal him again. Where the hell do I need to take her? As if reading his mind, several eyes opened in the ground, forming a line to where Nibi was. He strained his eyes to see where exactly Nibi stopped moving and let out a sigh. Damn it, better get moving. He had broken into a fierce run, hoping that she didn't have enough time to heal. Naruto found her in quite a pitiful state. Her left arm was slowly growing back, but at its current rate didn't look like it would be finished for quite a while. The cat mask that adorned her head was cracked and in some places had gaping holes. All in all, she looked dead. Perfect, Naruto happily exclaimed while he grabbed one of her ankles and started to follow the eyes again. Damn, these eyes freaked me out. He hadn't walked very far when he finally reached what he assumed was the destination. It was a big dip into the sand, giving it a crater-like appearance, and in the center laid a giant smooth black stone. Shrugging his shoulders, Naruto walked down and placed Nibi atop the stone. So, this it? It had taken several moments before the sand started rumbling. Several black chains shot out of the ground, wrapping around the unmoving body of Nibi. Firmly secured, Nibi was pulled under the sand. Naruto stared for a few seconds at the empty spot before the ground started to quake again. Slowly the head of Ohos rose above the sand, soon followed by his body. The 6-foot Arrancar now stood on the surface of Hueco Mundo for the first time in 2,000 years. Tilting his head down, Ohos looked at his hands as he closed his hands and opened them again. You did pretty decent, young Vasto Lord, so I've decided not to kill you or your lackey. Whatever. I'm gonna find Grimmjow. Do what you want, just remember, if you want this territory back you'll have to go through me. Saying his piece, Naruto walked off. Ohos watched as Naruto left, smirking. Once he was out of sight, Ohos let out a chuckle before heading off in the same direction. Grimmjow dodged another bala. It was pathetic really how this hollow was fighting. As it stood, Grimmjow started to wonder if this thing was really a Vasto Lord. That all you got? Your dissapointingme? Vasto Lord. Letting an indigent snort, Grimmjow mentally laughed at calling this weakling a Vasto Lord. After all, what kind of Vasto Lord wouldn't be able to put up a fight, especially against an Ajukas? Honestly, I haven't even gotten warmed up yet and you're already half dead. Spitting on the ground in disgust, Grimmjow began walking towards his opponent. I guess there's no helping it. Now in a run, Grimmjow intended to end his battle with one final move. When Naruto arrived, Grimmjow had already finished off his opponent, and was quickly devouring him. The grotesque sight of a hollow eating another hollow hadn't been something Naruto had grown accustomed to. When he did though, Naruto couldn't help but notice how vicious it was. It didn't look like it was done for pleasure, at least in Grimmjow's case, and the way the panther tore at the limbs made it clear to Naruto. It was for power, plain and simple. You wanted to climb up the ranks here, it was eat or be eaten, literally. Naruto never questioned it, he didn't have a reason to, and with a goal in mind he had convinced himself that he would do it through any means necessary. Yet now standing here watching his partner devour his enemy, he couldn't help but feel it was wrong somehow. The problem was, why didn't he think these thoughts when he was busy doing the same thing to that Shinigami or even the hollows he had eaten? Naruto could only guess it was because he was too busy eating to care. He would reflect more on this later. When Grimjow finally finished, he heard a snort come from behind him. His curiosity piqued. He turned around to find Naruto staring at him. "TCH, and here I thought I'd get to see you get your ass kicked," Naruto said. "Shut the hell up, Fox. I bet you got your ass kicked, yourself." Seeing Naruto shrug, Grimjow dropped it. He had just gotten a good meal and he still wanted to find out what happened to Ohos. "So what the hell happened to Ohos, Fox?" Grimjow asked. "Hey, I'm right here." Both Naruto and Grimjow turned their attention to the source of the voice. El Emperador de Ojos stood there dressed in Shinigami garb, only white with a black haori. He had long unkempt black hair that reached below his shoulders. A large Zanbatu was strapped to his back, and for the oddest reason it made Naruto think of a demon. The most disturbing thing about him though was his eyes. Instead of eyes, they appeared to be black voids with a swirling white spiral in the center. "I haven't had a good fight in over 2,000 years. I'm not expecting you boys to give it to me. But I think you'll be good for a warm-up. Don't worry, I won't kill you, you're both far too interesting for that. Just don't disappoint me too much." With the words said, El Emperador de Ojos charged. Confusion, panic, and desperation, all these emotions passed through Naruto as Ojos charged. The most disheartening thing about it was the guy's spiritual pressure was practically non-existent, but that couldn't be possible considering Ojos was glowing with an eerie black energy. "See, I told this would fucking happen. We should have made a run for it, but no, you had to give me the 'I made a deal' speech." Grimjow's mind moved at a frantic pace in an attempt to come up with a plan. Too late, in an instant Ojos cleared the distance between the two hollows and himself. He gripped the hilt of his Zanbatu and, faster than either Grimjow or Naruto thought possible, brought it down between the two hollows. Black energy erupted from the blade, seemingly cleaving the sands in half, forcing Grimjow and Naruto to jump to the sides. Ojos smirked. "Just as planned," he muttered. He let his blade go, made fists, and crashed them together in concentration. Eyes started to open up all around his body, each one glowing with black energy. "I haven't done this in over 1,000 years. Let's see if I still have my edge, shall we?" The excitement that Ojos exhibited made his last statement sound more vicious than he intended. Naruto and Grimjow both landed in the black sand, on opposite sides of each other. Both of them examined the wound in the dunes that Ojos' sword had created. The sand poured into the dark abyss as a small gash was literally cut into the ground. The two looked behind them to see it stretch on for what seemed like forever. Grimjow charged, soon followed by Naruto. "The fuck, man? Haven't done what in 1,000 years? 'Cause it sure isn't whatever the fuck you're thinking." Naruto sighed at his partner's statement. He really needs to work on that, he thought to himself. The world stopped after that thought. Naruto's vision started to grow hazier, the air became wavy, and the ground started to quake. It felt like it took every ounce of strength Naruto had to just move his head. Finally he stopped on the imposing figure that was Ojos. Naruto had to close his eyes from the blinding energy that started to gather around Ojos. "How is this possible? I can't even feel your power," Naruto shouted out in frustration. "Not even those 3 Shinigami made me feel like this." Cracking his eyes open, Naruto was able to see a smirk on Ojos' face. The atmosphere was intense and exciting, Ojos had decided. The fact that his newly chosen sources of entertainment were so panicked helped matters immensely. "It's quite simple really, why you can't sense my Ryotsu. Do you remember when I told you that the sand was constantly draining away my Ryotsu? Did you honestly think that being released from my prison for less than 5 minutes would allow to be back at my full strength?" Ojos let out a small chuckle when he saw Naruto's eyes widen. "Do you get what I'm trying to say then? I told you I had complete mastery over this sand, be it manipulation, absorption of others' Ryotsu, or even manipulating that very same Ryotsu as if it were my own. Combining these aspects is allowing me to use more Ryotsu than you can comprehend at the moment, and lets me conceal it at the same time. Of course merely manipulating this sand is boring, therefore." As he said this, Ojos' body started to absorb the black Ryotsu that covered his body. "I'm going to help my recovery along a little and absorb the collected Ryotsu from the sand until I'm 100%. Slowly but surely Naruto felt it. Small and inconsequential at first, it soon grew to a power that made breathing a nearly impossible feat. The Ryotsu swirled around Ojos, going from small whirlwind to large-sized tornado, picking up sand and earth. Yet, Grimjow and Naruto stayed rooted to the ground. The Ryotsu ripped and crushed him at the same time, so much so that Naruto thought he would pass out. Then it all stopped, the sand landed back onto the ground and the land looked as if nothing had happened to it at all, save for the gash that Ohos had created earlier. Even Ohos looked like nothing happened. His body was no longer covered in eyes and his body stopped glowing with black energy. Ohos cracked his knuckles. Alright, now let me show you what a real fight is. That was the last thing that registered in the Fox Hollow's mind before a pain, unlike anything he had ever felt, exploded from his abdomen. The exhilaration of completely destroying someone. How I've missed it. If it wasn't childish and disturbing, Ohos would have giggled like a schoolgirl when he felt Naruto's bones crack from the force of his kick. Grimmjow could only look on in shock as the legendary Hollow delivered a kick to his partner's midsection. Motherfucker. I didn't even see him move. TCH, and he's ignoring me too. Bastard, you don't ignore Grimmjow, Jigger Jacks. Angling his leg upward, Ohos lifted the fox off the ground and sent him airborne. Oh yes, these two have quite a bit of room for improvement. Honestly, that kick wasn't even strong even to cleave a Manos Grande in half. Yet you waste time, Grimmjow, when you face someone who outmatches you. Every second of the battle counts. Turning around, Ohos found Grimmjow to be charging up a Sero. You are also quite predictable. Do you really think a simple Sero will stop someone like me? Allowing himself fall into his long unused combat rhythms, Ohos utilized the technique, Sonido, to appear in front of his second opponent. He smirked at Grimmjow's pathetic attempts to readjust his attack and swiftly punched his head down into the dark sand. The Sero exploded prematurely, engulfing the two combatants in its destructive energy. See, it was that simple to counter your attack. Ohos, unfazed in the slightest, knelt down to check on Grimmjow's injuries. His body seems fine, his face is. Perhaps I should have thought of another course of action. The Arrancar sighed when he finished checking Grimmjow's injuries. The cat Hollow had half of his face blown off and a good portion of his mask. Grimmjow breathing at all was a miracle in Ohos' opinion. Before Ohos could even attempt to aid him, he was forced to dodge as three spear-like objects attempted to impale him. Really, Naruto, I didn't injure you that much, did I? A young strong Hollow, like yourself, should have been back earlier. Maybe then little Grimmjow there wouldn't have had to suffer such a grievous wound. The only response to Ohos' question was an increase in Naruto's spiritual pressure. Naruto retracted his tails and stared at the two across from him. His 5 tails swished angrily as he realized his partner wasn't moving. Bastard, don't you dare think I'll let you walk away from this alive. Using speed he didn't know he had, Naruto charged in for Ohos, and using the momentum from his sudden burst of speed crushed his hand against Ohos' jaw. He gripped his wrist and let loose a howl of pain as Ohos was knocked back by the force of the blow. It's like punching fucking iron, Naruto thought to himself. Digging his feet into the sand to slow his momentum, Ohos finally managed to stop. Looking at Naruto already regenerating his damaged arm, Ohos chuckled. Incredible. His Ryotsu grew again with the release of 2 more tails. His height decreased as his energy became more compressed, and he almost managed to break through my Hierro. The boy's potential is unbelievable, yet he's still holding back. Hey, but he still has a ways to go, better make sure he knows that. Bravo young Naruto, bravo. You almost made me feel that one. Though I must confess I was expecting you to at least make me bleed a bit, but alas, I feel I should make you aware of who you're dealing with. Using Sonido, Ohos appeared in front of Naruto before the Fox Hollow could react. He took hold of Naruto's arms, crushing his wrists. Naruto, let's see how far your regeneration has come along. Grinning manically, Ohos kicked Naruto viciously in the gut. An ear-splitting ripping sound accompanied as Naruto was again knocked away. Ohos looked at the arms he still held within his grasp, blood dripping from them. Naruto skipped along the surface from the sand, shouts of pain echoing in the desert. Finally stopping at the base of a dune, Naruto felt the full effects of his lost arms. The pain burned through his entire being. Finally, after a small delay, his red Ryotsu covered the bloody spot where his arm used to be. Slowly his arms began to regrow. Stupid bastard, it'll take a lot more than that to deal with me. Even as the words came out, Naruto's eyes betrayed the pain he was feeling. Ohos smiled a bit. Obviously you still need to work on your regeneration abilities, and Grimmjow still needs to work on his stealth capabilities. Grimmjow, undeterred, clamped his jaw down on Oho's shoulder. Growling, he attempted to rip off a chunk of flesh. Ohos let out an annoyed sigh. Grimmjow, if your partner didn't hurt me, what makes you think you have a chance? Looking at his fist for a moment, Ohos speared his hand into Grimmjow's newly reformed mask. Ohos secured a grip and ripped the cat hollow off his shoulder. The two hollows had regrouped after that, causing Ohos to let out a small chuckle. Honestly, I haven't even started fighting seriously and you two are already tired? Ohos feigned a disappointed sigh. What am I going to do with you two? If you're defeated by me not even taking you seriously, how am I supposed to be confident enough to tell you the secret of becoming a Ronkarhum? Ohos finished. The hacking coughs that Naruto and Grimmjow had exhibited blocked out most of what Ohos said, but the two were able to garner the last phrase of learning to be like him, and hearing this both hollows willed themselves to stand. It was Grimmjow that was the first to speak. The hell you talking about? What the fuck is an Arankar? Something like you? You smell like a Shinigami in a hollow. Ohos smirked at the two hollows before him. You both have much to learn. Essentially what it boils down to is an Arankar is a hollow who has removed his mask. It prompts a change in a hollow down into its very core, essentially changing it so much that it can no longer evolve as a hollow. Of course the advantages easily outweigh the cons. Your mask becomes a Zanpakuto. Ohos pointed to his sword. It unlocks a spirit's latent Shinigami powers. What it boils down to is that you become part hollow, part Shinigami. The two stared at Ohos as if he were crazy. They turned to each other. Grimmjow snorted while Naruto shrugged. It was the cat hollow who broke the silence. Fine, let's say we believe hollows who take off their masks get Shinigami powers. The fuck does that matter? I fought them before, they're all weak except for their bastard captains. The grin that appeared on Ohos' face chilled the two hollows down to their very core. You're thinking far too close-minded, little hollow. Imagine a Shinigami's capability to seal their abilities coupled with a hollow's natural ferocious power. What's your damn point? Grimmjow growled out. Ohos chuckled. Little hollow. Don't tell me that you don't know what the nature of a hollow's mask is. You don't, do you? Truly you've never questioned why it is hollows must feed on spirits? Well then it's time to enlighten you, isn't it? A hollow's mask is a source of its power. It provides every hollow with special abilities that make it different and unique from every other hollow, much like a Shinigami's Zanpakuto. Unlike the Shinigami, however, we can't seal our power into swords. Hence they continually eat away at our Ryotsu. That's what makes it so hard to gain power as a hollow to move up the evolutionary ladder. But that's also the reason why when some hollow does accomplish this, his power jumps to levels that Shinigami can only imagine. Now imagine, if you would, what you could accomplish with that ability to seal your powers and then train your body. Your power would jump by leaps and bounds. The prospect was definitely appealing in Naruto's opinion. Ripping your mask off, huh? There's gotta be more to than that, Ohos, otherwise there'd be nothing but a Rankar in Hueco Mundo. Even if it was appealing, Naruto wanted to cover all the bases. Ohos nodded to confirm Naruto's question. Right, there are indeed some requirements that must be fulfilled if you were to attempt this. Not every hollow had this potential, only some do. Those that do not have the potential that try this end up destroying themselves by separating their mask from their body. Don't just try and rip your mask off like a jackass either. Even if you do have the potential, the required energy could easily drain you away to nothing. To better explain, imagine it like this. When you're halfway through the process, your mask will attempt to drain away every last bit of you. Your body, of course, will attempt to compensate and start producing more Ryotsu. If you manage to survive the process, you may end up weaker than you were before. That Ryotsu your body produced will have been completely devoured by your mask. That's why you need an outside catalyst to supply you with the necessary energy. That way you can keep your power even with your mask out for everything you got. Of course there are ways around that, isn't that right, little fox? The two tensed at Ohos' cryptic words, but couldn't but be intrigued. Grimmjow, ever wanting a new way to kick someone's ass, decided to press Ohos about the issue. Hey Ohos, what kind of catalyst is needed? The Emperor of Eyes was picking up his Zanpakuto when Grimmjow had asked the question, silently wondering if he should have explained a Rankar to the rookies so soon. Grimmjow's voice crashed into his ears. Definitely should have waited, he muttered to himself. He had finished strapping his sword back onto his back before answering Grimmjow's question. I don't think I'll tell you just yet. I mean, I just got free and you want me wasting my time walking you through the stages of power? I don't think so. Tell you what, you actually get strong enough to stand in my presence when I flaunt my power and then we'll talk. Besides, this place has been without my presence for much too long, and I think it's time I revealed myself again. Before Naruto or Grimmjow could respond, he disappeared in a blur of speed. Grimmjow growled in annoyance. You believe that bastard? He gives half an explanation then just fucking disappears. I don't think so. Yo Fox, I'm heading after him, do what you want. Then in an instant, Grimmjow sped through the dunes. An answer to our problems may soon present itself. Naruto's head snapped up. What did you mean? Naruto couldn't be sure, but he could have sworn that the voice snorted. Didn't you hear, Ohos? You need a catalyst to undergo a transformation, and I believe, in my humble opinion, that you have the greatest tool to help you achieve this. Shrugging his shoulders, Naruto asked, what did you mean? The voice's laughter rang throughout Naruto's body. You'll understand soon enough. The voices, Naruto mused, just who did they belong to? Well, the females at least remained a mystery. He was almost positive the males was that annoying-ass captain. He hadn't heard the brutish one in a while either, not that it bothered him. The only one that he gave a damn about was the females, and he still didn't know why. He didn't know how long he stayed in that spot, but finally decided a change of scenery was in order. Focusing, he gripped the fabric of reality and ripped it open, creating a portal. He walked in and the portal closed behind him, leaving no trace that he was there at all. The void between dimensions was oddly comforting for Naruto. The blackness of it all, absolutely nothing but him, it allowed his mind to wander. Things started moving excessively fast for Naruto. Ohos, Arrancar, and his new den. Naruto smiled beneath his mask, my den. Then there was Ohos. The hollow was incredibly strong, at least from the impression Naruto had of him. However, he was also incredibly knowledgeable. Something that'll come in handy later, Naruto whispered to himself. Finally there was the loose cannon that was his partner Grimmjow. That one stopped Naruto for a bit. Quite frankly, Naruto didn't know how to classify the cat hollow. At times Grimmjow would seem to want nothing more than to fight the strongest enemy around the area. Yet Ohos caused the seemingly fearless cat to want to flee. Could it be a power thing? Wishing to fight someone on his level? No, Grimmjow wouldn't want that, he'd fight regardless, but if that's the case that means that Ohos' power must be greater than what I felt. Even then the bastard managed to floor us with just his presence. The fox hollow started to growl, unconsciously letting his Ryotsu rage about. That sucks. I can't let this happen. How can I make everyone recognize my power when I can be beaten so easily? Maybe I should look into this Arrancar thing after all. Naruto had started walking again, no particular destination in mind. Not even registering it, Naruto walked out of another portal into the human world. The lone Vasto Lord sat down into a village. Naruto looked on uninterested as the children played in the streets and civilians went about menial tasks. He walked through the village, an inkling in the back of his mind telling him he should know this place. Quite a boring place if you ask me. That's when he saw something that drew his attention. A man dressed oddly, yet familiar, walked past him. An urge raged inside of him, and immediately his body walked on its own following this supposed stranger. Naruto tried to rein his body under control. He used every bit of strength he had, yet failed. What the hell, why can't I control my body? Naruto tried to scream, but found even his voice to not be working. Being forced to watch the mysterious individual, Naruto couldn't help but examine the man in front of him. The red vest and white hair of the stranger swayed lightly in the wind in an almost hypnotizing fashion. Wait, this seems familiar. Do I know this man? I can't. If I did, surely I would remember. The fox hollow wasn't too sure about the last part. It seemed like an eternity before the man stopped. Naruto was quite interested when he saw the stranger turn his gaze on a small building, and giving a decent view of his face. Red paint went down his eyes and a small wart was on his nose. Suddenly the wind picked up, blowing dust into the man's face, forcing him to cover himself. The movement allowed Naruto to gain a full view of his features. He saw now that the red paint ran down the bottom of both his eyes and he had a headband that read, oil. Naruto also noted this man was in his later years. Hey, better pray you don't kill over today, Arrow Sennin. He stopped. The nickname sounded so natural to him for some reason. Why did I call him that? Arrow Sennin. The word escaped Naruto's mouth. What the hell, that wasn't me. The old man's eyes widened. Quickly he looked around himself as the wind continued its assault. Naruto. I'm sorry. The old man whispered before he started walking again. My name's Naruto Uzumaki and I'm gonna be Hokage. The Fox Hollow's mind was filled with a scene of a blonde-haired child in an orange jumpsuit making a proclamation to those around him. Who the hell is that? The scene shifted to showcase the young boy training in the forest, training for what the Fox Hollow didn't know. Apparently the boy was trying to channel energy into a controlled sphere which he would then use to obliterate his enemy. Shit, I didn't come here for this. This is my damn body and it'll take a whole lot more than some pathetic memories to slow me down. Using every last bit of willpower he had, Naruto attempted to regain control of his body. He just stood there not moving an inch, yet one look into his eyes and you would know something was wrong. The fact was another presence had made itself known in Naruto's being, and this one actually had enough will to affect him. Not only that, but this new presence apparently had knowledge about this place, and even had the audacity to force Naruto to witness its memories. Naruto started to feel it, the presence slowly losing its resolve to fight him for his body. He gave the presence no time to regroup itself and with a final burst managed to take back full control. Before moving on, Naruto made sure everything was working properly. He started to growl when he finished. Even now he could still feel the presence in the back of his mind. Look, I could really care less who you are, but next time you pull a stunt like that I'll destroy you. I don't care how far in my mind you do hide, and keep your pathetic memories to yourself. Naruto could only snort as he felt the presence exude a feeling of despair. Weakling, he muttered before he started off again. Continuing on his task didn't help distract Naruto from those memories fully. Even if he did firmly believe that the blonde kid named Naruto wasn't anyone he knew, it was still disturbing at how familiar the scene was. TCH, why did you have to ruin my day? That's when he felt it, almost an echo, a burst of spiritual pressure. It was only there for a moment before it was quieted, almost untraceable. Huh, that wasn't there before and it was strong. Maybe this day is still salvageable. With a laugh, a bit on the insane side, Naruto went off. He nearly lost the scent a few times, yet every time it was a dead end there was another flare. It was in front of a tower that Naruto found his prey. Hokage Tower? Wait, how did I know that? TCH, no time to be thinking about stupid shit. With a growl he jumped up to the upper levels of the tower. Unohana Retsu and Yoruichi Shiwan were bored. They were the next lucky pair charged with patrolling the newly designated red zone. Unohana-chan, I'm bored. Really, what was old man Yama thinking? Putting me on such a boring assignment. I mean, what are the odds that that stupid Vasto Lord will show his face again? Yoruichi groaned and fell back onto the ground. Unohana smiled at the younger Shinigami. Be patient, Yoruichi dono, our shift is almost over. She stifled a laugh when she heard Yoruichi give an unladylike snort. Even though Unohana had put on an outward appearance of someone who was calm and collected individual, her current emotions were far from it. Even now the words of what the Fox Vasto Lord said haunt her. Who do you think killed him? She never really got to Saito beyond anything other than a passing acquaintance, and yet she's told he was attracted to her. The thoughts constantly plagued her mind, certain little things she never realized until now about the dead captain. Almost every captain's meeting he would take the same path as her, even though it was several minutes out of the way. Even several times she would go looking for herbs in the mountains he was there, and every time he would always act like he didn't know she was going to show up there. The depression built up within her for some reason, though she didn't know why. She didn't care for Saito in a romantic sense, yet she couldn't help but feel like she lost her best friend. Yoruichi herself wasn't faring much better. True, she did believe the job to be boring, but she thanked her luck that it hadn't turned into anything else. She had witnessed the capabilities of the new Vasto Lord firsthand, and even though she didn't have access to her full capabilities, she was strong enough to engage at least a vice captain level Shinigami without much difficulty. Even with her full power allowed, thanks to General Yamamoto declaring this a red zone, she still felt quite uneasy. Not only that, but she was paired up with Captain Mom, as termed by everyone not in division, possibly the most boring individual she'd ever known. It wasn't that she thought any ill will towards the medic, it's just that when it came to anything entertaining she was always the last one you wanted to go to. When it came to conversation, the only you could possibly get out of Yunohana Retsu was a chiding for wasting time when you had work to do. However, she was one of the ones to meet up with the hollow, wonder what she thought of him. Yoruichi turned her head towards her fellow captain and asked, Yunohana Taicho, you met that Vasto Lord, right? What did you think of him? The captain of the 4th Division nearly jumped when she heard her name called. She finally regained her composure and turned to regard Yoruichi. I'm sorry, what Yoruichi dono? I wasn't paying much attention. Sighing, Yoruichi repeated her question. I asked what you thought of that new Vasto Lord that made himself known. For the faintest of moments Yoruichi could have sworn she saw Yunohana's eyes narrow into slits. Yoruichi dono, he is a hollow, and the most powerful type at that. What I think of him doesn't matter. What is important is that should we encounter him we eliminate him. The venom in which she spoke her words actually made Yoruichi flinch a bit. What's her problem? It's not like both Shinigami's thoughts stopped cold when they felt it. That can't be possible, Yoruichi whispered. The spiritual pressure she felt was undeniably the Fox Hollows, but the last time it wasn't as powerful. She turned to Yunohana, who already had her Zanpakuto drawn. You felt it too, didn't you, Yunohana Taicho? Yoruichi's only response was a quick nod from Yunohana. Digging her hands to ground, Yoruichi back flipped from her current position just as the Vasto Lord crashed into the area she previously occupied. Hey, looks like we meet again, ladies, Naruto said. His tail swished behind him as he crossed his arms. Looks like you're both ready to go all out. Any particular reason for that? Yunohana wanted nothing more than to rip the bastard Hollow's head off. Forget performing a soul burial, she wanted him utterly wiped from existence. Still, it wouldn't do any good to just charge into a fight with an opponent as powerful as, not to mention the consequences it would have on the real world if she just went all out. Curiosity also made itself known in her mind. He wasn't this strong before, and he only had 3 tails the last time. This is bad. If his full capabilities as a hollow haven't matured yet, there's no telling how strong he could become. Not to mention that I have one of the weaker captains as backup, she sighed. This situation was getting worse by the second. Yoruichi wasn't faring much better. She stared down at the Fox Hollow before her. He had changed a bit in outward appearance, but she still knew it was him. Well, at least you're not as tall now, Yoruichi muttered under her breath. She turned to Yunohana to gauge her reaction. Yoruichi cursed when she saw the older woman looking at the ground. Is she even paying attention to the situation? Damn, it looks like she's gonna be useless for a while. Well, since Yunohana Taicho seems to be out of it for a moment, how about I make the first move then? Yoruichi grinned before charging to deliver a kick to Naruto's mask. Naruto chuckled at the bronze-skinned captain. She was fast, he would give her that, but after what he just went through against Ohos, she didn't stand a chance. Waiting until the kick was mere inches from himself, Naruto gripped Yoruichi's leg, and using her momentum threw her off the top of the tower. He turned back to Yunohana and was to dodge as a katana was thrust at him. Displaying acrobatic movement seemingly impossible for his size, he managed to avoid the attack. Before Naruto could retaliate, Yunohana pivoted on her foot and shot forward like a bullet towards Naruto. In response, Naruto's tail started to harden and shot out towards Yunohana. Being a veteran, Yunohana wasn't that surprised that the fox's tails could be used as weapons. She had encountered similar attacks before in the past, and they all had the same weakness in that once dodged, the attack couldn't be re-angled and had to be retracted for another attack. And at the range the Vasto Lord was attacking, it would take some time to recover. Timing it right, she dodged each tail with a grace that was honed with years of practice. Naruto resisted the urge to laugh when he saw Yunohana continued her attack. She's underestimating me, he smirked under his mask. He would just have to show her you didn't underestimate the future king of Hueco Mundo. With a little more concentration, Naruto's tails bent back around and came at Yunohana from the back. Yoruichi had recovered from the throw easily enough. The problem was how far he threw her. By the time she regained her bearings, Yoruichi had discovered the Vasto Lord had thrown her clear to one end of the village. When she did finally arrive, she wasn't surprised to see Yunohana had already engaged. As it was, the battle looked like it was still getting warmed up. She made her move when she saw Naruto's tails come around and tried to skewer Yunohana from behind. Getting behind the hollow without being was the easy part. She wasn't captain of the 2nd Division for nothing. With her Zanpakuto, Yoruichi severed all 5 of Naruto's tails in one slice. The scream that accompanied her attack was loud enough to shatter glass, causing Yoruichi to almost cover her ears because of it. "You little bitch!" Naruto screamed out. He had gotten careless. Naruto hadn't expected Yoruichi to be stealthy enough to sneak up on him like she did. Blinded by his rage, Naruto made the mistake of taking his attention away from Unohana and focusing on Yoruichi. No longer under the threat of Naruto's tails and with the Vasto Lord's attention focused on the younger captain, Unohana finished her attack with little difficulty. Naruto felt Unohana's blade go through his back and out his stomach. Letting out an ear-splitting scream, Naruto gripped the sword's blade in an attempt to push it out. His attempt was futile as he felt the blade twist in his gut and force it through his ribcage and out the side of his body. Naruto's blood stained the top of the tower as it erupted from him like a fountain, so blinded by the pain he never noticed the axe kick aimed at his mask until it sent him through the roof. Naruto landed in a heap. His chest area was on fire and his mask had been massively cracked. Still, he wouldn't give up, especially to any Shinigami. He reached his hand out for anything to balance him while he stood up. It hurt everywhere and the gaping wounds in his chest and stomach had only started to close up. Wobbling a bit, he placed both hands on the table to keep from falling, and soon came to realize he was in an office. He looked around half-heartedly, his vision slightly better due to the holes still in his mask, and noted it was rather simple. He was about to leave to finish regenerating when he was stopped by a gasp. Quickly he looked for the source. Is it another ambush? Naruto dispelled that thought from his head. Looking down at the front of the desk, he saw something that nearly caused him to gasp back in surprise. It was a woman, blonde hair, 2 ponytails, well-endowed, brown eyes, and the remnants of drool all so familiar. The presence that Naruto had fought off before was back in his mind full force. Tsunade had in a state of depression ever since the news of Naruto's death reached her ears. At first she denied it with tears in her eyes and begged Kakashi to tell her it was a lie. When the copy nin turned his head away from her, it was like a mirror breaking. What little hope she did have died when she saw the blonde's body. After that she just didn't care anymore. She didn't talk to anyone and her position as Hokage didn't mean anything to her. Drinking and sleeping were all she seemed to do anymore. Tsunade just wanted her Naruto back. Now this monster stood in front of her desk, oozing with the essence of Kyuubi, with Naruto's face. It was either some sick joke or a monster. Yet there was still that small part of her that held out hope that somehow Naruto had survived. Still, she had to be sure this wasn't some kind of dream or attack. Finally, she couldn't take the tenseness of the situation anymore, and before she realized it, she had whispered the name, Naruto. It was a raging battle for control of Naruto's body. The presence in Naruto's body desperately wanted control, even if it meant getting himself killed. Naruto just couldn't have that. Fucking idiot. Stop it, there's 2 Shinigami on our asses that have no qualms with killing us. We can worry about this woman later, and besides, if we both die you'll never do whatever the hell it is you wanted to do to her. Naruto slowly felt full control returning to his body. He was rather curious how this female in front of him related to the foreign familiar presence in his body, but he still had some Shinigami he needed to pay back. Spiritual pressure flared, as if in answer to his thinking, making Naruto look up. 2 feet planted themselves firmly into Naruto's face. The wooden floor groaned in protest before giving way to the force of the pressure on it. The 2 fell through the tower. Any attempt made by Naruto to regain his bearings resulted in another savage kick. Shit, she won't let up, Naruto thought as another kick landed on his side. In a desperate attempt, Naruto lashed out with his arm. Yoruichi smirked. He's getting desperate? Maybe he's not as tough as we thought. With the skills honed as a master martial artist, Yoruichi wrapped her arms around Naruto's wrist and, twisting around Naruto's body, put her knees at the base of his shoulder. Using the leverage, Yoruichi pulled back on the Fox Hollow's arm until she heard an audible snap. Letting go of his arm, Yoruichi kicked off his back as he crashed into the bottom of the tower. From the healing tails to the broken arm, Naruto tried to find any part of his body that wasn't hurting. He tried to chuckle, instead only blood leaked from his mouth, as he slowly got to his feet. Shit, I'm getting fucked up pretty bad. Hey, almost as bad as that fight with Saito, except, this time it's a girl. TCH, speaking of girls, where the fuck is that voice? You'd think she'd be offering words of wisdom by now. Naruto stopped thinking as Thread Ryotsu covered his body again, slowly closing his wounds and piecing back together his mask. "Hey, you gotta love the fast healing Shinigami?" Naruto said as he turned to see a smirking Yoruichi. Naruto let out a threatening growl. Seeing this Shinigami so smug made his blood boil. "I'll admit you caught me off guard, but don't get too smug. I won't underestimate you again. Alright boy, show her what you're capable of. Don't hold back anymore. Go forward and show them what they should fear." The voice made fueled Naruto's rage as something inside of him snapped. Every wound closed, every mask fragment reformed, and arms set back into place as Naruto's Ryotsu built up in a pillar of power that extended well above the tower, the village. The whole of Konoha felt it. A presence that hadn't been felt in 16 years, the one being that nearly destroyed their entire village. Civilians broke into chaos trying to escape the malicious feeling of dread that had overtaken them. Parents abandoned children, children cried and fainted, and the ninja raced toward the source. Yoruichi was taken back. This much power should be impossible. Even old man Yamamoto doesn't have this much Ryotsu. Even if he did evolve from Ijukas to Vasto Lord in record time, he should have stopped his growth. Hana and I can't take this by ourselves anymore. As fast as she could, Yoruichi reached for her soul phone. This is incredible. No holding back, no limitations, I can do anything. This wasn't like when he fought Ohos, Saito, or even when he nearly killed Yoruichi. This wasn't showing off anymore, testing the limits of what he could do. This was raw, unbridled strength. He stared at Yoruichi as she pulled out the instrument that forced his retreat last time. The very earth couldn't withstand Naruto's speed as he moved to intercept Yoruichi. It was pure bliss when he crushed her hand and in the process her phone. He wanted to chuckle at the look of pure fear that appeared on her face when she realized what happened. "Still gloating is what got me in trouble in the first place," Naruto whispered. His body tingled when he felt her. Looks like the second one decided to act then. Wonder why she hasn't helped till now. With a hold on Yoruichi, Naruto quickly scanned the tower for Hana. There, he found her, 2 floors up, putting away a phone. With a growl, Naruto threw the 2nd Division captain towards Hana. Not wasting any time, Naruto opened his maw, as Ryotsu gathered in it, and released a Sero. It's not real, she thought to herself. The body was there in the casket. Tsunade remembered the day when she saw it, when they buried it. Yet she saw it with her own eyes, a monster that had her Naruto's face. It didn't answer her when she called out to him. Then that woman had attacked him, smashing him through her floor and down to bottom of the tower. Tsunade wanted it to be a dream. She would have given anything for it to be a dream. Yet the hole in her floor remained and the sounds of combat could be heard from below. Then, like everyone else in the village, she felt it. The malicious chakra of the Kyuubi. It teased her, antagonized her, and dared her to say it was still a lie. Still the leader part of her, one she thought had long since died, begged her to take charge once again. To defend the village that her little Naruto loved so much. Tsunade steeled her resolve. Whether or not that monster was Naruto, she had no doubt that he would still fight to the death to protect this village. Moving with speed and precision of a legendary ninja, she made her way to the bottom of the tower. Hana screwed up, something she didn't do very often. She allowed her desire to make her friend's killer suffer blind her. Moving quickly, she managed to catch Yoruichi and avoid the Sero the Hollow had fired. With Yoruichi in hand, Hana fled from the tower. Now with Yoruichi seemingly crippled in one hand and the Seirei saying reinforcements may or may not be coming, hold for orders she had been told. Hana was left with a very angry and very focused Vasto Lord to contend with. Immediately she went over every Kido spell she knew. Most took time and even then she wasn't sure if they would do enough damage to the Hollow to be worth it. She thought of her Shikai and Bankai, then immediately dismissed the thought. The reports that Aizen had submitted stated that this Hollow had no qualms in eating Zanpakutos, and every attack Minazuki had was slow to build up. Hana shook her head. Minazuki would just be a giant meal to this Hollow if what Aizen had witnessed true. Then there was the issue of the amount of Ryotsu the Vasto Lord was emitting. The last time such a thing occurred was the Quincy, so many people in one place being exposed to such massive Ryotsu. Hana wanted to curse. Is this the reason Seirei is hesitant in sending reinforcements? Still, these people used chakra, the essence of life. If it were mixed with Ryotsu, it could prove to be fatal, and the ones lucky enough to survive would no doubt be hunted down. A disturbing roar broke her thoughts. Again her attention was stolen as she felt her fellow captain struggle against her. "We must hurry. We need time to regroup Yoruichi Dono." Ryotsu thrashed around, reflecting Naruto's anger towards his prey. They had run, he'd seen them, and before he could give chase he was surrounded. Surveying them, Naruto came to one conclusion: they were human. They all wore the same clothing, more or less, probably military, Naruto thought. There she is, Aga, Naruto thought to himself. There 4 floors above him stood the blonde woman. A tingle stirred in the back of his mind, weaker than the previous times, and was utterly squashed. The last thing Naruto wanted right now was to fight over control for his body. I don't have time for this shit right now. He made to walk out of the tower. He was sure the Shinigami couldn't have gotten too far. Sound reached his ears, something moving through the air, he deduced. Content to ignore it, Naruto continued walking. Something had pegged him on the back. It didn't hurt, yet something did feel odd about it. Another sound, this time sounding like something was just lit. A memory appeared in his mind, a little piece of paper, yet still produced an impressive explosion. Explosive tag. He felt the air heat almost instantly. The tag's reaction to the chakra focused into it was always delayed. Small shards of metal were released due to the tag's seals. Combined with the heat, this was devastating to living beings, and with its final release created an explosion, utilizing the nearby air as fuel, that engulfed the Fox Hollow and a good portion of the room. It didn't hurt, it didn't even pierce his skin, but the fact remained: they had attacked, they had underestimated him, and they thought him a fool. They spoke, Naruto could hear it. He understood the words: "Stop, moron," and gave orders. The Fox Hollow growled. Not only did they try to destroy him with that pathetic attack, but they also thought to ignore him. That tore it. If they wanted to die so badly, he would be happy to oblige. Naruto. That woman had said that name again. A roar tore its way from Naruto's throat. Instantly the chatter stopped. The tension was thick, everyone frozen from fear or anxious as to who would make the next move. Naruto ate it up. The intoxicating fear the humans let off in waves. "Which one of you bastards threw that explosive tag at me?" Naruto asked. Looking around, he noted most of the ninjas seemed surprised. Seeing that no one answered him, he asked more forcefully. "I asked which one of you bastards threw that explosive tag at me. Answer, and I may not kill everyone here. Well, maybe I'll kill most of them, but they don't need to know that." Again no one answered him, and this time most of the ninjas started to take out weapons. That's it. He held up his hand. A sphere of Ryotsu formed around it, with the intent on atomizing everyone in the tower. "Wait," Tsunade yelled. She had heard and seen enough. The voice, the energy it emitted, and the monstrous fox-like appearance, it all pointed to being Naruto in some sense. A sigh of relief was released when she saw the fox monster had stopped momentarily. Hesitant to approach but still anxious to confirm her curiosity, Tsunade jumped to the ground floor and approached the Fox Hollow slowly. At this point Tsunade could care less about protocol protection of the village. She just needed to ask this creature a question. "Is that you, Naruto?" She tensed when the beast growled at her and became weary when he started to advance on her. Tsunade mentally went over several scenarios should the need arise to defend herself. Not that it mattered in Tsunade's mind anyway. After that horrifying display of power that had practically half of Konoha's military in the tower with her, all sweating bullets, she doubted they could last at least 5 minutes. The hollow stopped right in front of her, and slowly brought its mask inches from her face. 2 bluish orbs stared into her eyes, its hot breath blowing against her skin. Tsunade could faintly make out the outline of a person's face within the fox-like skull. Seemingly done with his inspection, the hollow pulled its face away and looked at everyone surrounding him. Tsunade was about to give up on it when he spoke, in that same voice that she had grown to miss. "Lady, I want to kill all of you, I really do. But the only reason I haven't is because something keeps holding me back. It keeps telling me you're important, and I don't know why. It's fucking annoying. Fuck, this stupid Naruto kid who you probably think I am, no fucking clue. I got a couple fucking memories of him wanting to be this pussy thing called Hokage, and then he goes about it like a goddamn jackass. Honestly caring about gaining people's respect? Bullshit reasons. He should have wanted them to fear him for his power. I don't even know why I'm telling you this. I should be killing those fucking Shinigami and feasting on their innards right now. But no one of your jackass ninja had to go and throw a fucking explosive tag at me for no fucking reason. Tsunade stood there shocked. This monster was Naruto, or at least partially. More questions flooded her mind she desperately wanted to ask. She took a step forward. Before she could do anything else, Naruto again talked. You know what? Forget it, forget the whole fucking thing. I'm too fucking annoyed right now to deal with anything. A black portal opened up behind the agitated Hollow and he slowly walked in. Tsunade raced to catch him, desperate to make him stay, but to her misfortune she merely touched the outline of the dark void. That small contact with the afterlife, however, affected her in a way that would forever link her to Hueco Mundo. Her body stiffened, it felt like her entire body was on fire, and she promptly collapsed. The very last thing she was aware of was several shouts of, "Hokage-sama." "Something is wrong," Hana muttered. Initially when she retreated she had fully expected the Hollow to follow her. Perhaps those whose spirit powers have awakened drew him away. She shook her head again. That seemed highly unlikely considering there were 2 Shinigami captains he had forced to retreat. She turned to look down at the unconscious Yoruichi. Her hand had been completely crushed. Easy enough to fix, the true problem was the Hollow's Ryotsu. It seemed to have done some more extensive damage than she was capable of healing without the proper equipment. That in itself was odd. The Ryotsu she did manage to remove from the wound was rather poisonous. Hana had never encountered anything like it. Yamamoto-sama will need to be informed of this. Informed of what Hana Taicho? The 4th Division captain, startled, turned to the source of the voice. Hana let out a sigh of relief. Yamamoto-sama, you are aware that Yoruichi Dono and I have encountered the Vasto Lord class Hollow codenamed Kane. The old man nodded, allowing her to continue. Upon engagement we have found his power has grown substantially. Yamamoto stiffened a bit before nodding again. During the battle the 2 of us managed to do substantial damage, however, this Hollow has displayed some troubling abilities. Its regeneration factor is phenomenal. It managed to recover from a shattered mask, broken arm, nearly severed torso, and several other breaks and lacerations within minutes. Its Ryotsu also appears to be poisonous, and with all due respect Yoruichi Dono needs medical attention. The 4th Division captain made to move Yoruichi back into the Soul Society. The old captain stopped her, and motioned for several Shinigami dressed in medic garb to care for the tan-skinned woman. Before Hana could protest she was cut off. It will take some time before you are truly needed Hana Taicho, but for right now I wish to inform you of your new assignment. Hana blinked. It was quite odd for captains to be given assignments. One of the Central 46's agents has reported in this incident. The general consensus was there would be another Quincy disaster, and almost immediately we speculated a report to slaughter this entire village. However, seeing as how this Vasto Lord is seriously becoming a nuisance, and fear of losing our own men, they have decreed that this village, should they wish to continue existing in the realm of the living, will have to aid in the purification of said Vasto Lord. Yes, I know it's a moronic idea, but Central 46 believe that these people's training for the military will allow them to adapt to their new powers efficiently, but they still have decided a liaison is necessary. You will be it. The news kept getting worse and worse. Hana thought. Yamamoto-sama, these people will be slaughtered. We can't allow this to happen. Captain Hana, know your place. The fact remains whatever Central 46 has decreed we must follow it. Instantly Hana sobered up, understood Yamamoto-sama. With that she followed to the infirmary. Yamamoto stared at the village of Konoha and sighed before turning and walking back into the gate.
That's all for now. If you want to see next part, then please like this video and subscribe my channel. Thank you.